Excuse me. All right, guys. We're going impromptu live stream here, hanging out on Prime's open panel, and yeah, we're gonna have a good time. All right, let's get into it.
What you mean by decentralizing education? Like, what would that look like?
Me?
No,
Wonk.
Well,
You guys
so
know
I
Wonk is an
don't see any value in
anarcho-primitivist, right?
standardized.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah.
So I don't see any value in a standardized system. Like, to have the same education given to every single person is of very little value. If they all get different educations, we'll be far better off as a result.
What does that actually mean, though?
But,
What does
like,
that actually
Germany.
mean?
So I have a.
Hold on, one second. I just want to now because we're going to be arguing about different things here, right? So I'm trying to understand what exactly Womp is saying. So, are you simply saying like individualized, like to the child? Is that what you're saying? Because I think lots of people are in favor of that. What exactly do you mean by this?
Well, so I'm more interested in. I would like the educational facilities to be independently developed.
They are.
And provide a diversity of educational options.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
They will
No,
continue to do.
They don't.
But we have an issue there with standardization, don't we?
Okay, but you're
oh my
fucking standardization there. So
No, he's right. He's right. He's not wrong though. Like,
no, let me explain. Okay, so I agree that local situations are going to require, to an extent, different development of institutions. But fundamentally, my argument here is not about how the institutions develop, but the quality of education and the information that is taught. That is my argument. That's my focus. Because what happens is we have right now is the amount of information that we're taught and the level of educational quality is vastly different across different states and different counties and different cities. Like, we have several states that like fundamentally teach like Civil War as like a war of northern aggression versus like Civil War, like the control of like slaves and stuff. So like that's a fundamental issue with decentralized educational right now. But if we have the like educational quality standards, like the level of interpretation is going to differ in terms of institutional development. But if you have,
what do you mean by that?
Like, well, for example, like if you have California, you're going to have different days and probably different levels of organization generally, and like how many people are going to be on like part of the board or something.
Not really, no. Compared to like, I mean, I don't. I'd have to pull up research, but generally, like a state board of education is that, and then I have my local board at least. That's all I know of it as.
Yeah, and that's one of the worst aspects of education, the education system. So like this really shows its head. So we can get into like the all the different subjects, particularly history and how it's taught in different states.
Oh yeah,
particularly about the Civil War. But the biggest thing we should get into is how sex education is taught on the state, the county, and then the school district, and then the school level. There's very little regulation in very many states, mostly red states, right? There is no standardization in a lot of places from school to school. And so you have a bunch of kids who get pregnant, don't understand how to use protection, are wholly ignorant on a bunch of different subjects regarding sex education. And then you have some kids, like kids from California and New York, who their brains are fucking massive. They know everything about fucking sexual education, all that stuff. But then you have someone from like Oregon who is not Oregon, because I found out I guess Oregon's more blue than I thought, but like Nebraska, right? Who like the kid will be like, oh, like, you know, we're just supposed to not have sex, like until we're married.
Yeah, I was taught that in Texas.
Oh yeah, I got one of those
and
cards.
Like, the data's clear, right? There's like
abstinence is the only way.
Abstinence only education literally just makes teenagers get pregnant and get diseases. That's all it does.
So what age do you think would be a good age to start teaching kids about sex education?
So like this is so like you teach different stuff in different stages and you repeat it over because they're very short courses and you don't have to go over it very much and very long. You don't have to have like an entire semester about it. So like for me, I started learning sex ed in like the 5th grade.
Holy shit, really?
And like I think even earlier is better because the thing is, the people say like, oh, you're like ruining the kids or something. But the point is that like knowledge can't hurt children, right?
Mhm.
Like I guess some knowledge can because it makes them scared. But like specifically this kind of education, there's no evidence that like teaching a third grader like what a penis is or like what a vagina is harmful to them. If anything, it just makes them more aware because I don't know if you guys know this, there are 10, 11-year-olds who have sex and get pregnant, and it's horrible. It's it's so scary. Can you imagine having an 11-year-old get pregnant? I can't even
with an 11-year-old penis. No, I can't. That's weird. Not even fully developed yet.
Gotcha there.
Goofy ass.
I mean, I wouldn't be confident in my 11-year-old penis. I don't know what kind
This
of
just got
hormones you guys are
to
acting.
such a weird place. I don't think I have
My-
anything to
my,
say
like,
on this.
Prescribed, like, what I prescribed. in
I don't
curriculum
even know
was,
what we're
like,
talking
you know,
about
in
right
like third
now.
grade, and then 5th grade, and then 8th grade, and then like 10th, and then like 12th grade or whatever. Like you go more advanced
I
and more
can't.
specific, whatever. And specifically, one thing I do advocate for is LGBT sex education and teach it to everyone. Because the thing is, right, while not everyone will need to use it, you know, having that information will not hurt you, right? It'll also help dispel
Normalizes
certain
as well.
stigmas
And quit using
like
the term Native
stereotypes about
American
gay
too. We've
people,
all
and
internalized
also like the kids who are LGBT, either that don't know it yet or are in the closet, will feel less alienated, be more informed, and will, you know, not get STDs and die, right? So that's good.
Well, also, sorry, just one
in
thing.
the world
Like one thing I've noticed
just
crazy
happened?
throughout this whole country is like everybody's okay with saying the term Native American, which is just like it's despicable. Like
What?
it's terrible why everybody's internalized and been okay with First Nations and Indigenous people being called this. But I get it's from my local school's
Can you
fault.
explain why?
So the term like Native American is like a byproduct of white settler colonialism. So like when you call somebody native to the land that you raped and culturally genocided them from, the name that it's not called they're native to, it's kind of like that. The only difference between First Nations and Native Americans is that one's in Canada, one's in in America. Just up there, we recognize at least that it was wrong to call that sort of thing that.
Are you native?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So how do you like actually know that this is an offensive term?
I mean, you could probably listen to a bunch of people who are indigenous talk about it.
Yeah,
I do.
I've already
I've
tried to look. I've literally tried
Hold
to look
on.
into this topic before.
Yeah.
There are no polls. The only thing
Exactly.
you'll find are some anecdotes about like people talking about how the farther you get away from reservations, the less people call them Indian.
Exactly. So like
Why
I
does
work
the whole
with
country of
I work
Canada
with
not call them Native
I
American?
work with Inuk people, Inuktitut, or
Okay.
people who live up in Nunavut, and
Mhm.
none of them. This is anecdotal because obviously your evidence for this is
Anywhere, right?
anecdotal. It's going to be anecdotal because there's no polling on this. So they identify as Inuk. It's hard to say it. Their language is really hard. Inuktitut, or they come from Nunavut. So they identify as Inuit. They also identify as native. They say that I'm native.
Yeah, Inuit would be the proper term for people up there.
Inuk is the proper term.
Well, for the classification of like indigenous people in Arctic.
So essentially, you kind of just seem to want to get into like this semantical debate, right? You're trying to get into semantics as far as possible.
It's like
you don't have any actual evidence.
Yeah,
you don't have any actual
this got
evidence to
weird real
claim
fast.
that native people do not like being called native.
This reminds me of the discussion on like whether to call someone Hispanic or Latin or Latinx, right?
No, I mean she's right, or I don't want to sorry.
Yeah. So it reminds me of that discussion.
But literally, I've been
so hold on. There's like not an actual, because not surprising, the Latin community is a diverse community with lots of different thoughts on this. There isn't a consensus like at all, right? And so now it's popular within like progressive communities to use like Latinx, right? But if you ask Latin people, and some actually went out and did those polls, right? A lot of them, like, first of all, they haven't even heard of that, or they don't want to be called that. They want to be called something else. I just to say that Native American,
it was a criticism of our school system, because in Canada, like I was educated on some of the most conservative people I know on why I shouldn't say the term Native American to First Nations people there. That's where my point. Well, I don't have data to back it up or crap like that, but I didn't even know I lived on Wichita territory until somebody educated me.
Yeah, and it's great that you found out you live on Wichita territory, right? But like Canada's not the only country in the world. And the other thing about this too,
we're one of the only ones that recognizes at least our cultural genocide of First Nations people.
I'm aware. And so, but the other thing, well, you know, you guys would actually, if you stop like fucking telling Inuk people whether they can wear fur or not, wouldn't you? So like the other thing is this, is that your criticism about schools, right? Now, like I understand the criticisms about like public schools, which is true. Public schools are pretty fucking shit in the United States.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is in Canada, but like
I went to school in
people
Texas.
learning,
I
people
grew up in
calling
Texas.
people Native American is not one of them. Like one of the biggest problems I have, I'm sorry to say, one of the biggest problems I have with some leftists and progressives is that you guys focus on the wrong fucking thing. And someone calling someone native is not one of them things to worry about.
No, you're right. He is focusing on the wrong thing.
Okay, so
I was focusing on something that I haven't learned in school.
Buddy, it's Red. It's okay. Let's move on.
All right.
So I think another quality, besides just sex education itself, is also I lost my train of thought. So if somebody else wants to take up the reins, I'll get back to my point.
Yeah.
Okay, so
oh, you can go.
It's kind of weird to like adjudicate, especially.
Wait, can I clarify my point really quick? My whole thing.
Boy, hold on, stop. No, thanks. Thanks, stop. So it's kind of weird to try to adjudicate this about like Native people. Just like I don't know. It's like not that big of a deal. And something we have to focus on.
I was trying out.
I thought it was an interesting. Oh, wait a minute, 1 second. Thank you. Thank you so much, Riley.
Just seems like
for being so kind as to rate us. Thank you so much. 177 people. That's really,
just
really
seems
kind
like
of
a
you, Riley.
bit of a.
And Riley, I would love to get you on the channel one day. I don't think we've managed to do that yet. But Riley, if you would like to come on, definitely would want to reach out and make that happen. But to Riley's people, to her community, thank you for being here. My name is Prime. This is my channel. Right now, we're having an open walk-on panel with members of my audience. If you want to be a part of it, you can. Exclamation point open. Let you know exactly how to do that. Yes, we had these panels, talk about all kinds of stuff. We had a closed panel just a little while ago. That was a lot of fun. If you missed that, it was really, really good. Definitely something you should check out. And we do these all the time. We give you content 6 days a week. We have content 6 days a week here. And we have we gather a lot of interesting people. We'll talk about fascinating topics. Oh, fascinating. The topics that I come up with. And they're usually pretty fun. So if you want more of that, please, again, hit that follow button, hit the notification bell so you know I'm going live. We do it all the time. And we even have a game show on Saturday, Primetime Morale. So we give you all kinds of content here. I think you'll really enjoy it if you give it a chance. So please, please, please hit that follow button, hit that notification bell right now, so you don't forget, so you know I'm going live. But thank you again.
Yeah, so I think we're just still talking about education and
but thank you seriously for being so kind as to raid the channel. And welcome to all of
yeah, Dave, that's basically what the general consensus I think in the panel was.
We were talking about
schools.
Schools and states' rights. I thought that was really interesting. I just thought that was really interesting what Charlotte mentioned about the.
So I remember my points now. If you want me to.
Yeah, I think.
Going, Prime.
I think that's kind of why we sort of moved on from it, because I think everybody was in agreement that, like, yeah, this is just a stupid thing to focus on. Like, even if we grant you this and say that, like, yeah, this is the thing that's happening and it's bad, that isn't the worst thing about our education system. And we're talking, I guess, we're kind of discussing ways that we could try to fix things. So
people who are adults, and this way they can tell they are being abused. There's
also teaching about consent.
Yeah, like consent. Like the idea is like basically, I'm of the mind that we should start teaching consent even younger. Like if a person does not want you to touch them at all, you should recognize when they communicate that. Like we're taught like boys will be boys. Like if pulling a girl's pigtails in like kindergarten is like a thing that's just going to happen. Like that's an example of what occurs if we have fundamentally these communication with consent. Like I didn't learn about consent until I was in fucking college. and that's a problem itself. And we need to have those fundamental education methods in there because we can teach people how to be like healthy human beings, interacting with each other healthily, and it's also going to teach like people to rape less.
Rape less, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I
don't know about all
haven't
that,
gotten rid
but-
of all the raping, but I've been raping less lately, so it's been
Well,
working
when I
out
went
for
to
me.
University of
No,
Arkansas,
I'm actually
Jesus
curious.
Christ, dude.
I'm actually curious about that. So, like, you
I'm not.
said to teach
Keep
people.
that in the closet.
You said
Keep that skeleton deep in the closet, baby.
okay, universe. You mentioned to teach people to rape less, right? But and I totally understand. I understand the like the not all men thing, right? So you didn't know that if someone says no to sex, you back off?
No. What I'm saying is, there, like for example, there's often the idea in our society that we're taught like if like we see like signs and it's like it's okay, but the problem comes is we need to have a defined communication method for people to communicate to each other like, hey, I like you like me, do you want to have sex? And then from there, there's a clear, definite communication. We don't need to rely on like these body language or like social cues in those scenarios because the social cue scenarios are not going to be as well defined. But if we have like defined communication, that makes it a much more effective means of people communicating needs and desires.
Yeah. So you learned more about communication, not necessarily consent.
We're creating a defined means of consent instead of like an insubstantial social cue situation.
When I went to the University of Arkansas, we had to take a video on what is tea, and no, screw Arkansas, I hate that place.
I go here, but I just was relating.
Oh no, I'm relating as well. So we had to take the tea video and all that. When I went to school in Canada, that wasn't a thing. I advocated for it, and I wasn't allowed because there wasn't enough proof to show that like this little video worked against proactively stopping sexual assault and stuff like that. It's literally just something you do at your what do you call it, orientation or before your classes, and it's like, what is tea and blah blah blah. And I wanted to implement that.
What is tea? I don't understand why you're referring to tea.
It's a video with a cup of tea explaining and analogizing.
Okay, so it's like E, tell, empathize, whatever, like some shit like that, right?
Don't feed tea when the person doesn't want tea. It was this little cartoon. Everybody had to.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
But I wasn't allowed. This is an example where I don't know data, but it wasn't allowed to go through on the Canadian university end because they're like, we don't actually know if this like works. Like,
Mic check.
So
works is very subjective. Of
I
course.
would say to
we've had the consent debate on here before, and I don't really want to do that again.
I would say to you, Patty, that in terms of consent, that some people do need to be taught that no means no, right? Because in our media landscape, you'll have situations where people get messages that no is the start of the negotiation, rather than it not being saying like, okay, I don't want to be a part of this, and that's okay, that's valid, and move on or something else, right? So yeah, we actually do need to get those messages out.
It's not that I don't think that kids do not need to be taught consent. I absolutely do think kids need to be taught consent, but I think that people who are rapists or people who are adults and they don't take no for an answer, I think they're well aware of what no means. And it's not a matter of if they were taught consent. It's a matter of the fact that this is a person who psychologically does not care about the concept of no. So these are people who, for example, what's the guy who assaulted, and I don't know if he raped, but I know he sexually assaulted a girl behind a dumpster, and he got off really, Brock Turner. So Brock Turner is a very smart kid, and he understands the concept of no. He was probably taught concepts associated with consent like most kids his age. Maybe, I'm not sure. But he knows the concept of no. In knowing that he knows the concept of no, this was displayed even in court. It was pretty clear he understands those concepts. it's not about understanding the concept for him. It's the fact that denying the no that he was given brings him great power. And that's the problem with rapists. They know what no means, but denying that someone said no brings them great power, and it brings them great personal satisfaction.
Didn't Brock Turner's dad, though, make a comment about drunk people and sex or something? And it was like, oh, she was just drunk, whatever, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, his parents aren't good role models either.
What's up, Nightmarish? Sorry, I'm trying to get a few things together, so I'm just listening in for right now. We're kind of talking about education right now.
The issue that happens is like rapists have a lot of distinguishing factors and conditions in which they're going to be rapists themselves. Like there's also like the people who engage it for the power play, but there's also like other factors that are going to significantly
don't really have anything to say on these topics. This is like,
for example,
we got really weird there for a minute.
Individual autonomy. The idea of consent goes into the person's autonomy, the autonomy of body, the autonomy of freedom from harassment, of physical assault, of sexual assault. What the idea there is, if you teach these fundamental concepts at a younger age,
should be taught sex is for
instill it into the schemas of a person.
I don't know, man. I kind of agree there.
I agree. I'm saying that rapists don't abide by this even when they get older.
But what happens is
there's some other points to like sex ed that I agree with, even though I don't like the idea of the schools teaching our kids sex. Like,
I'm not sure if that's necessarily true.
So I guess I would respond to you, Patty. And first of all, I just want to take a quick moment to welcome our new people. Then I want to respond to Patty. Thank you, Rox, for being here. Really appreciate you coming through. Rox is your name, right?
Yeah, Rox. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for being here. Thank you, Mitch, for being here. We had a person named Paul who's gone. I don't know. But yeah, I guess they're gone. Never mind. Yeah. I guess it's everyone that I missed. But so to Patty, I would say the goal is there'll always be people who will have a criminal mindset, right?
The same way,
and some people will use that criminal mindset
that argument would never even
steal from others, right?
Then we would just be on
or to scam others, or right?
Religion
and some
debate,
people will
and
use
it
that criminal mindset
would just be
to
fruitless, honestly, with this panel.
Take the bodily autonomy away of someone else. Why did someone move? Sorry, something's happening behind the scenes. I don't know what's going on. Okay, so some people will do that, right? But like that's the goal is to change the general mindset, right, around these things. So for instance, if there's women, like someone at a party who's inebriated, right, like and like a group of guys like gather around her, like these men should know, hey, this woman is not to be touched. She cannot consent, right? And we leave it alone, right? There might be one of those guys who might think he should go farther, but then if we put this mindset out there, this general education mindset out there about consent, or however you want to define that, then they can step in. Hey, knock it off, buddy. That's not cool, right? But if they don't know, then a lot of people may stand around and watch it happen. We've seen this. We've seen exactly.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that. The problem is so like I don't disagree with any of that, and I don't disagree with the teaching of consent. I don't disagree with making people aware about things such as rape culture. That's not stuff that I disagree with. The problem is that when people when people say this, but they say it in encouragement that like if we do this, rapes will go down, molestations will go down. I'm not sure if that's necessarily true, because it's not the teaching of consent that's necessarily the problem, but rather the fact that, and here's the other thing is like in multiple countries, including this one, the United States, they've had to implement what's called Good Samaritan laws. These are essentially things like everyone here knows that hitting someone and murdering someone is wrong. But we still implement Good Samaritan laws because there's been multiple cases in which in the midst of someone being murdered, in fact, we just had a recent case, a guy was carjacked. Nobody stopped him. They just pulled out their phones and video recorded it. and he died at the end. He ended up getting killed and
can't
died.
really fix
So
it,
the
whatever.
issue
It's just
is
gonna
that like
it's just gonna be weird.
the issue is I think it's the argumentation for me, right? It's not necessarily implementing these things because I agree with them, but the argumentation of, oh, if we do this and the rapes will go down, the murders will go down, et cetera, et cetera. I think you're setting yourself up for like huge amounts of psychological failure.
Is what you're trying to say maybe that the people? I think I understand what you're trying to say. Is that the people who are most likely to commit these acts are people who this education won't work on? That like these are
the education is this helps perfectly in things like court, because if they're taught this education, it's that they know that it's wrong to do so, but psychologically they don't care. So what I'm saying is that when someone makes an argument for implementing these measures, it shouldn't be about, look, the rapes will go down. No, you're just setting everyone up for like a really bad time when the rapes keep going. It should be just to hold these people extra accountable.
But how do you determine who's held extra accountable if a person hasn't committed a rape yet?
When we know after that incident.
And I agree that we should hold them greater accountability. But fundamentally, if we can have people commit less rapes, it's about prevention in that instance. Like I would say the prevention.
Sorry, say that one more time.
Because what happens if we prevent the rapes from occurring in the first place, that is a greater
but what she's saying is you can't do that because people that commit these actions are wired differently. Their brains are wired differently. It's not like they learned it. I mean, some people were, they grew up in horrible households and they just had this psychological trauma, but that's a rewiring of your brain. Normal people don't do this shit. They know that it's just something you don't do.
The things should still be taught. No, the things should still be taught because there are incidences in so-called regular people doing things that actually violate consent. Like those things should absolutely be taught. I guess what would make me back down from what I'm saying right now is if someone provided me ample evidence that shows when these measures are put in place in which people are taught consent, then rapes, molestation, and sexually taking advantage of people who are inebriated or whatever have actually gone down, whether it be college campuses or actual areas in which consent has been taught to schools and people and communities. Like I will back down from this position, but my only position on this really is that I think people are setting a bar really high and just expect it and then like ending up like what happened? Like they end up with like psychological failure because they thought the result of teaching this would be, oh, the rapes are all going down.
Patty, I have something for you. So I literally looked up, like I've never looked up this topic. I've actually never thought about this. I was like,
yeah,
why haven't I ever thought about look into has someone done a study on this or whatever? The first thing that comes up is undergraduate women who took a sexual education classes before college were half as likely to be sexually assaulted in college, according to a recent study by Columbia University, compared to undergraduate students who received abstinence-only education and saw no reduction in rate of assault. So basically, I think it's like when you give people the tools to recognize when they're in trouble, they're more likely to avoid that trouble.
Yeah. Now, what I want to know if this applies to the victimizers, not the victim.
My intuition.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have to look into this more, but my intuition is people aren't biologically rapists. That's kind of like weird to like assert.
No, I don't think people are biologically rapists.
That's what universe.
I feel like it would be hard to track that.
That they're wired differently. That like, oh, I'm built different. I'm built to rape.
I wasn't saying only people that are wired differently, but I think you have to be like you have to go through even the Brock guy. I'm not saying anything good about the motherfucker, but he was raised probably in a very wealthy home where he didn't really get taught the word no. So that wires your brain to really not think you don't think about the word no as like a real thing. It's not like if he went to school and they were like, oh yeah, don't do this. Where he spends most of his life is at home, and where he gets most of his teachings is at home. And if his dad is saying shit like, oh, boys will be boys, he's drunk, that just shows the kind of upbringing these people have. I'm not saying that only like the craziest people rape. There's a lot of fuck ass people that do shit that's just wrong because they want to take advantage.
I feel like it would be really hard to track this too, just because like not a lot of people are going to admit like, oh yeah, well, you know, thankfully I had that class, or I would have just been out here raping everybody. Like, it's kind of the same problem we have with like people like to ask like, well, you know, can you prove how many like crimes are stopped by police, or like, you know, you can't really prove that completely because, you know, just a cop sitting on the side of the road could have prevented something, and you know, it's not like someone's going to come out and say like, oh yeah, I was going to commit a crime, but I saw that cop there like in a survey or something.
This argument really only
measure the level of sexual education that rapists and sexual assaulters have compared to the general population. And maybe that could give you some sort of indicator, maybe not like definitive, but it could give some sort of like some sort of like that there's like some indication that if people know more information, they are less likely to do bad things.
Yeah.
I don't believe.
Well, I just googled it, and a review found that the majority of sexual assault preventative interventions, which were designed at deterring people from committing sexual assault, found that there was some positive effect on deterring sexual assault. So there is evidence to suggest that the majority of programs designed at deterring such behavior has a positive impact on preventing people from engaging in such behavior.
I have a question for those things. So my thing is anecdotal, and take it how you want, but frat houses are one of the worst environments I've ever seen for this stuff. Like UARC, like SEC frats are some of the worst places. These dudes are educated on this, and it flies under the radar. So how it's a big issue. I feel like, I don't want to generalize, but I feel like that is a thing. At least I've seen it, and it goes unreported and not a thing said. So I don't know like how.
I don't even think it's a college environment. It's just not even a frat house thing. The whole college scene in general is pretty.
It's pretty shit.
It's horrible.
It's horrible. Hey, can I say something real quick?
It's really bad.
Yeah, I just need to say something real quick. Hey, what's this dude's name? Life on the Couch, whatever your name is. Like, if you actually think I'm not saying anything, you're welcome to come on and teach me a lesson. You're welcome to come on and say something of value.
She's got data. Beware.
Yeah, I love that spirit. I love that spirit right there. That's good.
So I just wanted to offer like. I just wanted to offer like a tangent, a tangent from like what we were talking about earlier.
1 second, before you do that, there's people who want to jump in on this particular topic before we tangent.
It's still on the sex education in schools though. So,
okay,
but it was.
Right, we'll get back to you in a second. Hold on. I just want to make sure there's some people who haven't got a chance. So you were trying to say something, Paul, and Paul, welcome to the channel. Also, after that, we'll go to Mitch, and then we'll go to Nacho.
Yeah, I was just saying that I think the whole college scene in general is very disgusting in the way it handles rape and murder crimes in general.
Mhm.
Like, even at prestigious and good colleges, it's pretty fucking bad.
Yeah.
Like, and it goes under the radar. Like
Crime
Harvard
scene.
in the last like, I think it was, well, like 9 years or something.
It's definitely not a thing though.
Murders on the campus. It was pretty fucked.
Could I speak to the college thing?
Oh yeah.
That was all.
So let's go to Mitch, Rocks, and Mitch, Nacho, then Rocks. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Prime. One big thing here, in terms of the argument that like rapists already know that they're evil or whatever, and they have this like mindset, that's only true for certain forms of like sexual assault as well. So like, of course, someone that say roofies someone, they know that they're not going to consent there. But in other forms of sexual assault,
mute yourself. Universities, we can hear you typing like really loudly. Go ahead, Mitch, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. So with other forms of sexual assault, that's the thing. Like, as Prime mentioned earlier, an example that I really like is some people believe that when you say no, that's actually inviting you to negotiate. Because that's true for other non-sexual encounters. This is also true for, say, someone that asks someone to have sex, maybe pressures them like a little bit, and then they say yes, even though they're not actually into it. That's also a form of sexual assault, right? So like the thing is, it is universally true, I suppose, to someone to say roofies someone might have that like evil brain or whatever, but it's entirely possible that some people that might otherwise not be evil or might not even know that they're raping somebody might participate in these actions because they don't fully understand like what consent is or how consent needs to be gotten. I suppose is a big thing as well.
Okay. Let's go to Nacho, then Rocks, then Rage.
So just something I was thinking about earlier before we got to past it, but it like the whole teaching the sex education, because I've like changed my position a little bit on it. I guess it's like I'm more conflicted about it now. I guess because my opinion is that we should be encouraging, parents to be teaching their kids about these things. But then I also understand that, you come from a single parent household who maybe doesn't have as much time or whatever, or, your kids aren't, because normally it's like there's some kind of interaction that happens and then you're like, okay, we're going to have the talk. But then also, I read a study that was talking about how when kids are taught sex ed, when they get to that grade, there tends to be a lot of kids who come out and like report sexual abuse because they didn't know it was a sexual act before. So it's like, obviously we want more of those things happening. Like, that's why I said it's kind of tangent to this. It's like we want these things seem to be preventative, like, so it's kind of like a necessary. I mean, it's not really proper. It's not really evil, but it's like, just that term. Like, it's kind of a necessary evil. Like, it's better to teach it than to not, I guess. So.
Okay. Let's go to Rox, then Rage, then Wordy.
So a lot of people are speaking in regards to like college campuses are just like hellholes. Trust me, I know. I go to college. Fuck frat bros. But this study in particular, it specifically looked at programs that targeted the people who would commit sexual assaults on college campuses.
I just don't know how
with programs that had components like challenging like gender stereotypes, increasing empathy for rape survivors, providing information on the effects.
Yeah, that's why that's why I waited to
that are
address
specifically
it.
targeted in dissuading
some people were
from,
saying something
from
in
engaging in
chat,
sexual violence,
from YouTube,
and there is
and it's like
there is a positive.
Trust
impact
me, like
that this,
I'm a
that this
Christian, like
finds.
I'm more
Perfect.
trying to be more conservative. I
but
want
there
these
is
things to be
but there is a net benefit to these programs, as we can
there's a
empirically
net
see.
benefit. Like, I don't know. It's, trust me, it's not
Rage,
very easy for me to admit that or to want it, but it's
pretty
like
much agree with most of the people on the panel that knowledge is definitely important. More knowledge that we give to kids about consent, about understanding what's happening with their bodies, with other people's bodies, and all that jazz. With regards to campuses, it's always been weird to me that like there's campus police and then like there's other police, and something, not that they don't take things seriously on
nice,
campus.
Rhonda.
Sometimes they don't.
Happy
But
Rhonda.
it
That's
stuck
good. That's good.
when I did go to university and I was living on campus. Something that was really weird to me
This day and age,
was
society
they don't
wants so
report
badly to teach them
everything
before
to
the parents. It makes them
like
good
the official
citizens.
agencies.
Yeah,
Like
that's
if there
that's
are
what I
certain
don't like about it.
situations
It's
that
like,
happen on campus and they like, keep it on campus.
how do I
because
know I can
I guess there's
trust
like a
this
sort of
person that's teaching
they don't
my kid?
want
Like,
to.
I don't know.
I guess it's sort of some people see it as like a
This is
training
something
ground. They
that me
don't
and
want
my
to
wife
treat
have
the
talked about and
students
had
to the
pretty
fullest
in-depth
extent of the
discussions
law.
about,
But I think that
because
lets people
we're,
get away with
planning
things.
on having kids the
I
next
know
couple of
specifically
years.
they were doing it with like underage drinking, which I mean maybe we should change the drinking age as long as people are consenting to that as it is. But people would do things on campus, get in trouble, but you only get like a slap on the wrist because like, oh, you're just a kid going to school. But I think that having a culture
so
where
you
we
still
send a
want-
bunch of people to a place and
you
then we
still
treat
want
them with
these-
kid gloves, even though they're
want
actually
these,
they're adults at this point.
conversations
It's
coming
not
from the
necessarily
parents. Like, even my
good
mom,
for creating
I
a good
come from a single
environment.
parent
They need more
household,
kids
basically,
gloves,
and
actually.
my
So
mom decided
whenever
to have
I
this
was friends
conversation with me
my
and tell me
German
these
foreign
things.
exchange
So
students, they fucking hated the school here. They do pass fail depending on the degree route you're taking in Germany. I'll Google statistics for the stats people, but to my knowledge, that is a lot better for creating like research teams and stuff like that. It's not as stressful. You learn to work together instead of this bullshit where I pay $5,000.
yeah, I know what you're saying.
And then
Mediocrities.
it's like have to take 3 tests and that's my fucking grade. Like it doesn't learn shit.
Well, okay, like grading schemes and like your educational material, that's a kind of a different topic than interpersonal. Like essentially, we're talking about violence, like rape and sexual assault. So I think
shut up.
So I think treating people with kid gloves in terms of grading, that might be a totally different conversation. But in terms of if somebody does sexual assault on campus, I do think that they should be held accountable. Like that. I mean, on this panel, I believe everybody pretty much agrees with that.
Very brave stance.
But there are some systems where we have people who advocate for not prosecuting people on that, saying, okay, there was just a kid, he just made a mistake, let's move on. I know, like that Brock Turner case, his father was trying to get him off the hook because he got his whole future ahead of him. And like I think that mindset
He's such a good
is
swimmer.
Right.
that
So did the
mindset is
woman.
in that mindset's in our society, and we gotta get rid of that. There was one other thing that I wanted to we can just continue. I forgot the other thing.
Hey, Prime, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Can you let my boy? Are we allowed to say the N word?
Yeah. I mean, sure, you are, but yeah.
Okay, can you let my nigga Big Dude come in here? He will not disappoint you. I promise. I promise.
All right.
You had to ask to
As
say
long
it.
as
What a
he's-
great name, Big Dude.
I have a question about that.
But he will say the N word a lot. So if he's not allowed
That's
to,
fine. No,
okay.
it's fine.
I have a not Destiny question on that. But what if
Christ, is that my introduction?
Yes.
Sorry. One at a time. Hold on. Wordy, please go ahead.
All right. So, Patty, let me ask
Let's
you
have
one
Kevin
quick question,
Edwards.
and then I'm gonna follow up. So you would agree? That
Yeah, I don't know why he's holding up 223.
rape is caused
He's talking. He's streaming too, so I think he's talking to his chat. They're probably asking him questions about something. Who knows?
Say that question again.
Yeah, I have
Would you agree that
5.56.
rape is primarily caused by socialization?
I'm gonna have to ask you what you mean by that.
5.56.
People are taught the ideas of not taught the ideas of consent, individual
I
autonomy.
wonder, should I
and
just
they're
like start
all
holding up
socialized into these
shotgun rounds
ideas,
too? Like
aggressing against a person's own body and
just get
everything
my shotgun
isn't necessarily
and just load it.
Not necessarily. I don't think
wanna- I
that
don't wanna end
people
up in
are.
those Twitch
I don't
fails
think
where
for the
they, like,
most
blow
part people
a
are
hole in their wall.
actively taught to violate people's autonomy or the wills of people, such as if someone says no. I don't think that there's like this large grouping of people. So like rape is a psychological thing. It's not even about getting off, or it's not even about it's a psychological thing in which someone is imposing their power onto yours for psychological gratification. Now, this isn't necessarily
the hate for 5.56. Wait, what?
Yes.
I said I have 5.56.
Exactly.
To the guy
This
with the
isn't
red flag in the
because they're
background? Oh,
taught
yeah,
to
yeah,
do
yeah.
so, but there is a psychological component about them in which, for some reason, they reach gratification through these means, but it's not necessarily sexual. So when you say that, what you're essentially saying to me is that rape is taught. And I don't think that that actually is the case. I think that for some people, like for example, Donald Trump, I think Donald Trump was taught that in order for him to achieve things in the world, he needs to take it. And he probably has raped someone at some point. But that would be an individual in which I would say that these behaviors are taught. Now, when you have other individuals like say for example Bundy, right? Bundy grew up in a very well-off family, and yet he went around and there was no evidence to claim that his father told him to go out and brutalize women, and yet this individual went out and brutalized dozens of women and raped them. Is this something he was taught? No.
I think there's a confusion here.
Okay.
So I'm not arguing that people are taught to rape. I'm saying the absence of education, fundamentally of individual autonomy and consent, is what
I think
causes
there's
rape.
I think this is a both things going on. Now, I think that
I can
when
agree that
yeah,
there's some psychological
but
thing, but
here's what I'll concede to you on, right? Is that society not punishing rapists or being lenient with rapists helps encourage other people with these psychological
True.
this is going to be
Exhibit A,
bad
Hollywood.
phrasing, but with these psychological norms within them to think that it's easier for them to get away with it. I agree. I would agree that this is something that would be like taught or encouraged by society in which people think they can get away with it. But this isn't just as simple as saying it's taught or it's genes. Like this is a both things going on that helps push each other.
But basically what I'm saying here is that so social conditions create the psychology. Because people are not taught these fundamental ideas, they're more likely to have the psychological perspective. And because of that, they are more likely to engage in rape. And so what happens is you can look at individual actors of rape committing, but fundamentally, if you look at the systematic issue of rape, it's the socialization that comes into it, because there's the power dynamics that come into it. Like women are put into lesser like levels of power compared to men, and like different like more like different power disparities, different inequalities amongst gender, and all these different factors fundamentally all play into the psychology of engaging in power play that make
Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's not something going on, but what I am saying is that to me, it sounds like what I am saying to me, it sounds like that you're trying to kind of bring it down all to that, and I don't think that it's just all that.
I'm not saying it's all that, but I'm saying a significant representation of the issue here is in that itself. And because of that, if we address
How much is what do you mean by like significant? How much is significant?
I'd have to look at statistics myself and like
Okay.
studies on it in generally, but I would make the argument those are like a statistical, like a significant.
Yeah, Nightmare. That's why I was kind of like, okay, well, I mean, I guess we could just. I think she's just trying to. If I'm not mistaken, Patty is like almost in the same position as me. She's basically like libertarian, right, or like independent.
So
this would be this would have to be. This is once again.
So she tends to do
just
the
comes down to the numbers,
same kind of things that I do, where you just concede things to the leftist panels just to avoid.
And this isn't just for women, right? This isn't about women being aware, or rather, do victimizers
just to keep them
actually back off
docile,
more
I guess. I don't
when
know
they
how
are
to
confronted
explain
with this type of information and teachings? So it would have to come back down to the numbers.
But I don't know. I mean,
Wanna read
I
that
don't
study
know
right
why
now?
she would have said that.
I'm pretty sure Red Charlotte cited.
I would have said.
Red Charlotte cited a study concerning.
to
Red Charlotte
poke the bees
cited
nest a little
a
bit,
study concerning the victims, not the victimizers.
Well, Rox.
I cited a study that was targeting the victimizers. It specifically looked at programs that were. I can.
Okay.
So, had a guy.
My favorite person in the whole world, Jill the Solicitor, has shown up, and she wanted to talk on the specific issue. So I'm going to give her the time because she's not going to be here very long. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think college is a very specific environment because it actually changes the realities of rape culture significantly. Like if you look at rape generally and sexual assault generally, it's most likely by someone that you know and you're close to, and it's most likely a one-off thing. Like recidivism isn't regular, whereas in university life, most sexual assaults are committed by serial perpetrators. Serial perpetrators are most likely to be aligned with fraternities or aligned with sports teams, and the people who are most likely to be victims are unaligned freshman women. This shows the importance of social capital in these situations and how they create an environment that allows women to be more victimized. Also, there's a lot of alcohol involved in university life,
mediocrity is in the
is
same
shown to
way.
be
I don't like
often
the
involved in
I
sexual
don't like the
assault.
extreme right either.
Now, there are some other issues, of course, just in terms
People
of where
on
you're
either
at
side
in your
of the
stage of life when you're at university.
extreme
For a lot of
political
people, they're just
spectrum
starting
need
to
to
date.
be
These are their first relationships.
beaten
They're
over the
learning
head
about
with
themselves. They're learning how to
logic,
treat other people.
and
And that's where I have
that way
some
we
issue
can have
with
productive discussions in
universities dealing with rape and sexual assault internally. Because while I agree that some of you have said, oh yeah, well, we don't want to let people off with kid gloves, we want to make sure that people are held to account. Justice is only justice if the way that you determine what happens is also just. And I think actually there are a lot of instances where people have been denied due process by Title IX because, you know, two people were dating, they were sleeping together, they were drunk, they break up. 9 months later, someone says it wasn't consensual. The person who was accused has a slightly less believable story than the person who did the accusing, and that person is expelled from university. That has a lifelong that has lifelong consequences, just as being raped would have lifelong consequences. But we do need to be careful that we're not creating new victims. And I think consent is just generally a fucking shit, horrible way to look at sex at all, unless you are literally a lawyer in a courtroom prosecuting a case, because this is part of the problem. It should be about reciprocity and respect and being engaged with your partner and actually knowing that they're enjoying themselves, because all research shows that both men and women are incredibly capable at gauging non-verbal refusal. And when someone isn't into it, the only time that men scale down in terms of when they're able to read these signs is when researchers have added
No,
the
Kevin, I think that's
domain of
fine.
accountability into the discussion.
It's
then
just,
suddenly, oh my god,
if
they
you
don't know what
want
a
to
no
own,
is.
okay,
But yeah, I think
if you
consent,
want to
and
own
I'm so annoyed that
a
so many
destroyer
campus rape
style
policies have been
battleship,
built around consent,
that's
because
fine.
it just isn't enough to counter the problems that we see when we know about
on,
social
I'm trying to
capital,
listen to what
alcohol,
she has to say.
and the stage of life that people are at.
This is why this was a huge Twitter
So,
discourse a few months ago.
if you want to own
People
a
are really mad at Stockton
destroyer
for,
style
wanting to
battleship, that's
impose an
perfectly
alcohol
fine.
tax
Okay,
of like
the only
doubling it. Like,
problems are
currently
going
it's
to
like
arise
2%, so it'd
if
be like 4%.
you then want to take
and
that
it would
destroyer
decrease, like
style
alcohol tax
battleship
by, like,
and go shoot up a bunch of
35%
lefties
or
or a bunch of
something.
righties.
I can't even imagine
That's
what that
extreme.
would do to like
But no,
like to
just
sexual
wanting to
assaults
own
or
a
whatever.
battleship, I think I would probably also want to own a battleship.
I mean, I would presume that like university students, what isn't going to stop them from drinking for the most part isn't going to be like.
But it will stop them from drinking just enough collectively that there's going to be a measurable difference in the amount of people harmed. This is why like an alcohol tax or like a cigarette tax doesn't hurt individuals so much as it creates like collective effects. So like if enough people decide, no, maybe I can only afford 3 beers instead of 4 beers, right? But like the collective
minute.
effect of that on millions of people is like a huge decrease in the consumption of alcohol, which leads to decreased violence, decrease in like car accidents, all of these different things.
Yeah, obviously, I'm just saying that like the most likely demographic of people who would like the difference between that, like having 3 beers, wouldn't be university students.
Would or wouldn't?
Wouldn't. It wouldn't be.
Not. The studies find that
the
the effect is most pronounced on
poor
university
group.
students.
Like,
So-
I think they have quite a lot of disposable income as like just an average.
I'm pretty sure like I have a graph of like average incomes or something, or like average net
I'm talking
worths.
about disposable income.
Yes.
Studies specifically find that
average net
university
worth.
students are the most susceptible to the effect. They're the most likely to cut drinking in response to an alcohol
Because they don't have
tax.
as much money.
So to you, my friend Joe, who's already trying to run away.
So what was the-
getting out of here? She's had enough. But Joe, no, seriously, thank you for your input here. I thought that was really useful. And you and I have engaged on this topic multiple times in the past. And your thoughts about using consent as like the single axis to this topic. And I've heard them multiple times, and I like the way you put it this time in terms of like we should be teaching more on mutual pleasure, right? Mutual enjoyment. That's like an area that we don't want to actually cover, that most people don't seem to understand, and that we could make a lot of progress there. And that consent is just is one tiny piece to a much larger puzzle dealing with this. I thought this was really, really good. It's something that we never discuss on this channel. So I just want to thank for that. And I mean, you said this before, but I think I get it more now when you put it that way. So.
Yay. No, the other thing is that, just quickly, the way that consent is written into university sexual assault policy is as if it is something that is given, when in reality consent is something that is negotiated, especially at a period where people are experimenting a lot and like learning a lot of things. There are certain things that you might be okay with and certain things that you will not be okay with within a singular interaction. So it makes it really tricky if, say, someone is having consensual sex with someone and then at one stage that person gets choked, they're not okay with it, they say they're not okay with it, that behavior stops, and you go back to having consensual sex. The way that the consent framework is pushed in sexual assault policy, it's really difficult to understand how you should categorize that interaction, because there was technically a period where you were having non-consensual sex. And this also makes it very difficult for broadly men, who are most likely to be charged under Title IX. I don't know if you would even say charged, to have a Title IX case brought against them, to talk about that, because if someone said no and you stopped and everything else was good the whole time, like, it makes for a really tricky understanding of sexual interactions. And one other thing that you said in terms of teaching people about enjoyment is that the other thing that is ripe on campuses is that women overwhelmingly report during their university years that they do not have good sex ever. But that is not the case for men who report having very pleasant sexual experiences throughout university. So,
well, yeah, we experience it differently than
So,
you.
but
Hey,
no,
two birds with one stone here.
Wow.
I
different?
100%.
Is it? Is it different?
I 100% agree with you.
Have you ever heard a
on the
man talk
second
about
part.
sex?
Look, guys,
Men can be satisfied by a
complain about
grapefruit.
sex?
It's different.
Ever.
Look, man,
Okay,
it's been over.
different.
It's been
Why
over
is it
1,000 years, and you guys still can't find the clit. Like, come on.
Hey, hold on.
We're working
It's
on
different
it.
if you don't give a shit. It's different if you
Wait a
don't give a
minute.
shit. That's the only time it's different.
This whole
Actually.
conversation. This whole conversation
Scientists are just
reads-
about to crack the code. We're going to find the clit any minute, any day.
Any day now.
For sure, we're going to find that. But so I wanted to because I think that was like the heart of our disagreement before on what you just said. And, so the second part, I agree
I just
with you
like to let the
100%
record
in
show
terms of,
that
women not
I
having
do know where this is,
pleasurable
and that's why I'm
experiences.
married.
Yeah,
Okay, we'll just
like
say
we need
that.
to teach. We need to teach people in general. Like the prior sex said, it's not just like knowing the body parts, right? But how to have
Sizable
good sex,
portion
how
of
to have
sexual
enjoyable
assaults
sex.
in
And I think that's something
universities
that's
is female,
worthwhile,
female.
right?
What?
So
Really?
all
I
men.
want to learn that from the fucking teachers.
Mediocrities, could you post that? That's really
but
interesting.
But this
I would
is
like
the
to see
problem,
that.
right, Universe? Because you actually don't want to learn that at all. Because
really
if
like
you
to see
did,
that.
then you
I
wouldn't have said what you
learned
just
I learned
said.
through
Interesting. That's the first time I've ever heard
experience. I just
that.
I don't want some 70-year-old man to be
If you
like,
could find
this
that,
is
that
where
would
the
be
clitoris
epic
is.
to
You go
pull
ahead
that
and
up.
rub it like this and lick it at the same time. Spread the lips. Spread the lips. Get on in
Look,
there.
look.
It
That's an
sounds
extreme
gross to
example.
me.
You're just using like an
I know, I'm
anecdote.
making a joke. Yes, I'm making a joke. But
I
yes,
do.
I think you can learn through
You know these already
experience. You
exist.
can, but like you don't learn through like one night stands. I think that's why a lot of the times when you're saying like women in college have horrible sex, it's not really like lasting relationships. I think you learn through having a consistent partner where you get to test new things on. You know, that's how I learned.
But it doesn't
I didn't
matter
learn
because weirdly, in these one night stands, every single time a dude is enjoying himself. 9
Well,
times out of
that's why I
10.
think it's different because it's easier for guys to get off than it is for women. That's a fact. Okay.
Because
it's
no,
not. It's.
I'm sorry. No,
We don't need to
that is
try as
fucked.
hard.
Okay,
You
how
no,
does
you
that
don't try at
true.
all. That's why women don't get off because you don't. You're, and
Hey,
it comes
hold
back
on
to
a
the
minute.
reciprocity thing.
Oh,
No.
Shut up. Just Joe, go.
This comes back to the reciprocity thing. If instead of focusing on consent, you are focused on your partner having a pleasurable experience, you're respecting them enough to check that they are enjoying their time, then maybe we would have more women fucking coming in college instead of every dude just spreading his seed wherever the fuck he wants without giving a shit about who he's banging. That's the fact of the matter.
Make women
this
come again.
conversation, you know, it just gets to it just comes to the enlightened position. Like, don't you guys know that all
Well, it
sex
could
is rape,
be-
guys?
So-
Informed
so-
consent is impossible.
So okay, I wanted to engage with now. Don't worry, I'll let everyone else back in soon. But Joe always gets me with this topic. I think you're hitting on a lot of great things, and so that relates back to that first point you had made before, in terms of that scenario you painted, with the choking, right?
See, but yeah, so her perspective on
wouldn't the
this
optimal
basically
way,
leans
let me
towards
just be honest with her,
having
the optimal
moral.
way,
All of this
the
seems like it would be
scenario
solved
gone
by having
is that you
a
checked
moral
in with the
system.
person before you choke them. It's
So,
like, hey,
you know.
is this something you might be into? Right? Like,
Yeah, but this is what I said before about about
see if I can find
the fact that
this.
research shows we're actually very good at picking up non-verbal
amount of compassion
refusal.
for
I mean,
widely
if it's
different
the
groups of
first
people
time
in
you're
the
ever having sex with someone,
injure
sure.
them.
But
Well,
I don't think that
if I
women
ever
need
make a
to
moral
or men need
statement,
to
I
be in
Did
managerial
you ever read the
positions
original
whenever
graphic
they're
novel?
having sex.
Believe
I
it or
think
not,
if you are
Brendan,
in tune with your
the ending, of
partner,
course, of the
you
book
should.
and the-
And to me, that's not
life.
that's not a case of sexual assault. If something happens, this is what I'm talking about when I say consent is negotiated. Like there are times when things are going good.
The director's
and you don't,
cut
you know,
ending has the
'cause
original
you can
meaning. I
check
think
in, but
the
people
whole meaning of
also
the
make
movie
mistakes.
is pretty changed. I think from the book. I don't think you can just have one ending and change everything.
and
It's
not
pretty-
realize that that person didn't do it.
Sorry,
intentionally.
guys. I'm gonna turn down.
We're starting. I agree with you, Joe. I completely agree with you.
For those of you who don't know me, I am an anarchist political commentator and author of Snow White Zombie Apocalypse.
Consent is more dynamic, and it fluctuates in the encounter, and you got to be aware of these things, right? my only point of contention is that, like, in that
I'll try to
situation,
find
especially
something.
with a new partner that you don't know will enjoy that. Like, not everyone likes. Don't.
Okay,
no
I
one
know what our
likes-
disagreement is. I agree, but it's not necessary. It's
Okay.
not a necessary condition.
I use
in that,
Restream,
you know, like
but I'm
when
still
I'm
working
with
on it.
a
I'm gonna.
partner of
I
6
think I'm gonna use
years,
a
I
bot
don't need
to
them
do this
asking
because
every
there's too
time they
many
do
channels and
anything to
it
me
seems to
if it's
split one
okay.
off.
And it's not going to cover every single
So
instance of
I'm not sure
non-consensual
how I'm gonna
activity
fix
because
that.
sometimes things aren't done intentionally with foresight. Sometimes things just happen in the moment, and I still need to be able to say,
sex
no, that's not working
torment
for me, without it turning into a
pleasant to deal
I
with.
was
Yes,
just
true.
assaulted.
Yes.
Like
So
there is
the thing is,
space.
the consent has already been
So,
given
hold
in a
on,
long-term relationship.
One second. Yeah, yes, exactly that. It's been already. Well,
Like the consent can be revoked, but the thing is, like, when you're in a long-term relationship, you know what they want, right? You know the things that they like. So like once it's already been like delegated, like previous, like on a hand, like previously, right? It doesn't have to be during the encounter, but if they do say no during the encounter, the consent can be revoked, but the consent can be given for long periods of time. Like
no.
But also university doesn't educate like this. If you do, so at the university I work at, when you do the sex consent matters module, it says
Branch this out into 3 sections, with 1 and 2 being incredibly similar. So number 1. So the first premise is I exist. Second premise is I have an experience. Third premise is I want to maximize my experience. And then I'll repeat the same 3 axioms for other people. Other people exist. Other people have an experience. Other people want to maximize their experience. And then the third part is I believe 1, humans synergize to create a better experience. 2, if I help others maximize their experience, they will help me. And 3, assuming we all share moral systems, we will all synergize with each other. So that's essentially kind of like the foundation that I build all of my policy positions and my applied ethics positions out of. Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty based. So even if you're not religious, you can at least be a decent person.
So in that case, right, with a new person, then would the best way for that scenario that you painted to happen is to ask beforehand. Like, I don't know this person, but I want to try something new. It might be pleasurable, but hey, can I check in with you, right? Like you're saying, check in with their pleasure. But I mean, if you're not consenting to it, then you're probably not going to enjoy it, right? So when again,
if you're talking about one night
yeah, for
stands, you
anything
probably
new,
don't want to be
like
going
this
out
is just
way
like
too out of the
basic
box with
communication
it.
skills with your. This is just basic communication skills with a partner. Like even if it's a short-term partner, if you've never done something with someone before, you should just like people are like embarrassed to do this. Just like stop being a bitch. Like just ask them, "Oh, is it okay? Are you into choking? Or do you like this thing?" Because
That's
the
not what it is.
worst
It dries out the area, you
the
know?
best
It
case
just
scenario
doesn't. It
is
just a lot of
just
people it
the
doesn't work for them.
best case scenario. Well, stop being a bitch and learn how to communicate like a human being. So
I
like
can communicate without having to
yeah.
talk.
So
Is
the
the
thing is
thing.
like you don't want to end
if
up
I
in a
could just
situation where the
And
worst case,
yet you say
I'm gonna continue. The best case scenario is it becomes super awkward and it's just over, right? Like the mood is killed, right? Because like they really didn't like it and you know it's over. Worst case scenario is like you end up doing something someone really doesn't like, right? And they end up getting hurt, right? And you end up getting in trouble. Or they are really like hurt emotionally and like are just put off by you.
Dude,
Like
what
there are problems that
sex
come
life
with
does
lack
this
of
guy have?
verbal communication, explicit communication.
Big deal. I'll let you in, Joe. I want an answer to my question later on. So, but go ahead, Big Deal.
Yeah,
I might go in a second.
Well, then tell me. Then before you go, tell me.
No.
like,
You can go to other people first. Go to other. I'll stick around until I respond to you. I'm just letting you. I'm giving you a warning.
Okay.
So I don't see any issue with like people like giving or like providing what they're into before they like have a sexual experience, even before like a one night stand. Even like if you just discuss these types of things beforehand, all right. Even for like, even though most people be able to understand, like say a non-verbal cues or these types of things, it doesn't like really tell you enough about whether.
And then the third part is I believe 1, humans synergize to create a better experience. 2, if I help others maximize their experience, they will help me. And 3, assuming we all share moral systems, we will all synergize with each other.
Go on and proceed to the even if they end up say getting hurt in it, at least you had that. Versus like just in the heat of the moment, you're just like, hey, you want to do this thing that I saw in a porn video? Okay.
It's like weird and awkward.
Like proceed to go on afterwards with that.
Is it okay if I is it okay if I choke you?
Like just like in the middle of sex. Like no,
I don't know.
as long
I've
as you
never
discuss
heard of
everything
this happening
beforehand,
before.
Yeah,
things
just
are less
discuss it
awkward.
beforehand.
They're like more fun, and you don't run into any of the problems that you would potentially, right? It might not be probable that these problems could happen, but the fact that there is a likelihood that is probable enough, right, means that you should probably just communicate. It's super easy. Like it's
So-
really easy to just talk to your partner if you're comfortable with them.
So Joe, I think I just want to get some clarification for my own personal understanding here. So I think the argument that you and Patty hear is that the consent model isn't developed enough and it's often more superficial in its current extent. Like basically, consent while on a verbal level is some level of good. It doesn't necessarily encompass the full range of interactions on a sex basis right now. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I can't speak for what Patty is saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that consent has become so since geez, how do I consent is like a really bloated term that is used to cover literally everything now. It's used to cover pleasure, it's used to cover respect, it's used to cover reciprocity. Apparently consent is now a stand-in word for everything. And as Red Charlotte is saying, right, something that's really important when we're talking about sex is communication. And now suddenly you have this single word that's trying to represent 1,000 different equally important ideas. There is importance to having a conversation about respect. There is importance to having a conversation about pleasure. And we can't have any of those conversations to a meaningful extent because the only word we have that is accepted within the discourse to talk about sex is consent. And consent has a very specific meaning, and it is really only, I mean, obviously it's important to an extent within social interaction, but for me, consent is a legal term. And it's something that I understand legally. To me, it is one of the least important ideas when talking about sexual interactions because it should be subsumed into the other terms instead. If I am having a reciprocal interaction with someone where I am invested in their pleasure, then it is assumed that they are consenting because that is one of the base foundational things for me to be able to get them to a place where they're having a pleasurable experience. So the fact that consent is the benchmark is such a shitty low benchmark. And I just think enthusiastic consent and all of this stuff to me is just nonsense. And I wasn't prepared to come on and be hyperbolic. And obviously I spend a lot of time talking about this exact issue. But yeah, to me, the issue with consent is it's a bloated term that has become almost meaningless in a really complex field where we need much more language to have meaningful communication.
So I think
also,
I would.
Oh, you can go.
I think okay. So I think I get the perspective, and I think to some extent the issue that also can come with like the legal model of consent right now is it often puts
did you find
the
that?
onus on the victim instead as opposed to like the victimizer. And I think I get it where you're coming from, is that because what happens is like it's basically like schools just trying to adopt the model in order to like meet the baseline needs or like the baseline lack of like suing and such.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we should get rid of consent. I think it's important to keep it. I'm just saying it shouldn't be the cornerstone of our discussion of sex policy.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think we need like a greater development of models in order to like have a more like effective means outside of just like legal standards, but also like within social and like psychological standards as well.
I kind of disagree with that to an extent. I do believe actually, like, even though like the at the very least in the United States, the sex education system is garbage and awful, and I agree needs to be expanded a lot more. I think at the very least, the bottom line should be this is the bare minimum to not get into a situation where you have sexually assaulted or raped somebody. Like that should be obviously like the bare minimum.
But that's the problem. We shouldn't be teaching people to the bare minimum.
I know we shouldn't be.
People.
Wait. I agree. Which is why I said this is why I said that there should be other things along with, and we should expand it. But you said you disagree that this should be the cornerstone or something like that. I do believe it should in fact be like the cornerstone, the foundation. This is number one. Don't do these things, and then we can expand it to other things. I also kind of take issue. Yes, I think that consent to an extent is a bloated term, but I also believe multiple different things within the context of sexual interaction.
interactions with each other.
You just stepped into a wind tunnel, brother.
Yeah.
Driving a big rig or something?
Get away from that jet engine. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that.
No problem. But and so you can respond to that, Joe, if you like. And then maybe PB success. You had your hand up previously. And Nacho.
To be honest, I didn't fully hear it because of the jet engine, but my argument is always going to be that
My bad.
I think it's all right. It's all right. I'm into a more democratically hedonic style of sexual education. I think part of the reason we focus on consent still is the refusal of desire to women. Women aren't allowed to desire things. They are only allowed to be desired. And I think that's why we focus so much on consent and this idea that a woman is allowed to say what is done to her instead of viewing sex as something which is engaged in by two people. I think moving away from that would create a better sex culture generally. And I think, as I've said before, I think bad sex is just as important to learn about as sexual assault, because I think it's a continuum that comes from a lack of respect and care for your sexual partner. But yeah, I just think there are conversations and questions we can't ask when the conversation is reduced to one around consent. And I'm not saying we don't have consent in sexual education, but if that is your marker, if that is what you center things around, you are centering around saying, just make sure you don't physically fucking assault someone instead of like, oh, this is sex. This is what we want. Like, this is a pleasurable thing that comes from respecting someone. And this is why I got into sex politics in the first place, because I think one of the, in the heterosexual world, one of the most core interactions that the genders have is sex. And if you don't have respect in that space, you don't have respect anywhere. And consent does not constitute respect. Just not raping someone is not consent, is not respect.
So, amazing, Joe.
It's pretty basic.
I'm going to be hopping off here. Joe, thank you very much. I honestly, it's like added a new dynamic to the thought process. So I really appreciate that. So like that's not something I had considered before, and honestly, like that's like the second time I've heard you talk. I think like really good points. So overall, I'll be heading out. Thanks, Prime, for having me on. Check out Wordy Talks on Twitch. I'll see you guys later.
Okay, so thank you. And Joe, that was incredible. As usual, very very much impressed. Let's go to PBS and then Nacho.
Real quick, sorry. I too am gonna head out. It was really nice talking to you guys. See you next time.
Have a good one.
Bye, Patty.
All right. So next.
PB success, by the way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I totally agree with Joe on this, and expanding the conversation, and not framing sex to go into sexual encounters, not just thinking about what could go wrong, but like, why are you there in the first place, and so I wanted to connect this to an exchange from earlier in the conversation, and whether like socialization and culture was a factor here. And I think that culture is always a factor. It's always in the background, and I think a lot of these issues I view through the lens of culture. So even this, like going back to what, sorry, who's the last person that just left right now?
Patty.
Wordy, maybe?
Patty. Yeah. So Patty was concerned earlier that like, if people say that they're going to implement new educational measures, that not to get your hopes up, right? And I think one thing there is like a concern for the quality of the education. Like, it's not enough just to deliver information, because then we could just put billboards everywhere that say, that teach people about what about how to have sex, and it's about acculturating someone. It's about developing a sensibility. Red Charlotte mentioned something earlier of giving people the tools to think with, and giving people the tools to read their social encounters, and part of that is knowledge in terms of like, what are the concepts and the things that you have to like pay attention to, but ultimately like it's bringing people into like a cultural, like a mode of being. And unfortunately the education culture, like the culture of schools and universities, aren't so concerned with that. They're bureaucratic institutions, and they're ultimately concerned with the accountability and legal matters. Like I'm reminded I was I am a graduate student union member, and I'm not sure what the state of this thing was, but the Title IX was mandating us to be mandatory reporters, and it was in like the sexual assault training that we had, and this is really problematic. Our union.
Sorry, hold on. Before you do it, no, fuck, god damn it, Joe, Joe, god damn it, shit. All right, she left.
Oh, dang.
Fuck me.
Like
get back here.
the basic thing about communication is though, it's like, so yes, there are nonverbal cues you can give your partner to imply, or not even just imply, you're just using your body to say yes or no, like very explicitly, right? But the thing is, there are lots of people in society, particularly people who are neurodivergent, who literally don't understand those things, right? Or have a harder time understanding it. People who don't even have to be neurodivergent. Just not everyone has, there's no such thing as universal, like, unspoken language. It's all like dependent on where you're from, your culture, and like a bunch of other things imply different things, right? So like I don't think anyone here would think it would be appropriate for me to, on a one night stand, first night, to, without asking, pull out a knife and like cut someone's thigh, right? No.
This is the second weapon
What
you
are we
brought
talking
up.
about? This is not a weapon. This is a pocket knife. Shut the fuck up. This would be totally inappropriate,
still a
right? One,
knife.
it would be assault, right? I would be like physically assaulting them, right?
Well,
It would
tying
be
someone
super
up could be
inappropriate,
assault.
right? Well, yeah,
I
that's
mean,
but the point is that it's a sex act when it's consensual, right?
Yeah.
But
I'm coming at you guys.
just for something like this, and the more extreme you go, like verbal communication before the act is super important.
Yeah, it would seem
You
like
shouldn't be doing like
sexual
extreme things.
degeneracy
And like
could
people
be a
in chat were
problem
being like,
here
"Oh,
too.
choking's like normal." Blah blah. I understand that everyone in this like audience is like sex desensitized. The vast majority of the world and the vast majority of people, choking is not vanilla. And if you do choking
true.
wrong, you can get hurt.
You can kill someone so easy. It's not. I did jujitsu for basically my whole life.
What
You have no
are
idea.
we
If you just met a
talking
girl
about
and she
here?
hasn't told you, or you don't know
Alright,
that she's into
relax.
choking or not, you shouldn't just start choking her. Right?
No,
you
what?
definitely shouldn't
end
be
up
doing that.
crushing their fucking throat, and they don't do a blood.
Well, that's what I was trying to say. I was
Okay.
Damn, son.
Real quick.
Hold on a second. Hold on. You're absolutely correct, Paul. What you said is something that has to be repeated. Like in terms of choking, it's a bit of a side note here, but in terms of choking, hey, be extremely careful. Because you can easily seriously hurt someone, if not kill someone, when doing that.
Weaker than you could kill you by choking you very easily.
Very
Play it
easily.
safe
We
and
get
never
that you
choke.
know a lot
It's
about
no
choking,
joke.
a weird amount about choking.
What is
No,
happening?
but like moving it back to the conversation again, like Red Charles is entirely correct that like there is no universal unspoken language. There are clear like body cues and stuff like that could tell you sign language isn't universal, dummy. There are like multiple versions of sign language. There's ASL. There's even Black ASL, which is a subset of ASL. So like there are different forms of sign language. You're just completely ignorant on what sign language is if you think it's universal. Furthermore, like again, this has nothing to do with the overall conversation, so I don't know why you're bringing that up.
Okay. So PB success, finish your point.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I just want to bring up the idea that there are different levels of trust for different acts. Like for example, like I wouldn't go up to someone at a bus stop that I don't know and give them a hug, but a hug is a relatively benign, safe act. And so I think that with different levels of intimacy, there's different levels of trust. And verbal communication is a very easy way to get predictably get and reliably get a response for whether someone would enjoy something that you are interested in doing. I agree with that completely, but I just wanted to bring the idea of like thinking about it in terms of like not just transactional, but it's like dancing with someone, like reading people's. I know that I'm kind of opening that door up again to saying
Mic
like
check.
Read people's
Sorry,
intentions.
my mic was just being
and
weird. Had to get it to
yes,
stop.
communication verbally is a great way of doing that, but it's not, I guess, the only way.
No one's claiming it's the only way. They're claiming that it's probably the best way and the safest way to go about it. Because while pleasure and like happiness and a healthy sexual relationship are very, very, very important, the most important thing is you are not harming somebody. That is like the most important thing.
The thing is that this changes the longer the relationship goes on, generally, right? Generally. The longer you know someone, you know their cues. You know how they communicate physically. You know when they mean no and when they mean yes and what they're into because you've been with them long enough that you've had these conversations and you've, engaged, with them, right? Like, but when you're with a one-night stand or like a short-term relationship, things are completely different, and communication should be completely different.
We
And
got
again,
really
just
lost in
because
the
you have
weeds
long-term
here.
consent, that consent even mid-act can be revoked, just like instantly, right? They say no, you're over, it's done.
Yeah, I agree with what Red Charlotte said though about discussing it all beforehand. I think that's a much wiser thing to do than actually.
Yes.
Didn't you say that like not harming somebody?
A big part of the issue.
But wait, didn't Paul just say that like earlier that not harming someone is not as important or is less important than like the pleasure and all that other stuff? Because he disagreed with my statement on that.
Isn't that it's as important? It's that if you're focusing on their pleasure, like you are necessarily
I was supposed to go after
focusing on them not getting hurt.
success,
like at that point,
they derailed into so many other things. Like we were talking about education, and then we were talking about sex education being taught in schools, and then we were talking about potentially teaching consent in
if you're focusing on making somebody
in college age kids or high school age kids or something like that to like discourage like rape or sexual assault, etc. So
on making them comfortable. No, I said choking's not vanilla. It's definitely not something you should do on the first time you're doing something. But it's as long as you're focused on making the other person comfortable, which that should just involve everything that comes with that. So if it involves talking about something, if that's
thanks Mediocrities, thanks for coming in, and thanks for the sub. Appreciate you, man. It's 2021. If you don't know about informed consent, where have you been? LL
communication.
Does feel like a digression. I mean, I don't know what we're doing now. I was trying to bring it back, but we've kind of derailed past that point. I mean, I have some topics I want to bring up still, but
not
we'll
everything
see.
needs to be, can I do this? Is this okay? It makes for it can make for a really awkward time, or it could just be, but so can doing something without asking. So there's no like specific way to get this done, like with 100% accuracy. There's theoretical, but it's just not the case.
They are all about choking.
Why would we not do the safest way though?
Happening right now.
The thing is that I don't see
you can
any
do it,
individual, all right, like losing the opportunity to bang somebody because they were like, hey, this is what I'm into,
Well,
or
you need to go out more then.
It doesn't need to be like a script. It doesn't need to be like literally just listing every single porn category that you watch the most.
Oh god.
Okay.
I would never do that.
It just
on a piece of paper.
Literally just needs to be like, yo, like I think this is kind of cool, dog. Like trying to try this or whatever.
That's just like a CVS receipt.
Anything like this, all right, I think is way more useful than like all of the things that can go wrong in like the heat of the moment option. So like I always just say, even though like I'm sure somebody has like had an awkward conversation like spur out because of this, like the risk of that occurring I think is like a hell of a lot less than like anything or like say something worse occurring and like doing the vice versa, like where you just do it without asking them, or like in the heat of the moment type of deal.
So it seems like
really bad.
Sorry, I was just gonna.
Let's go. Yeah, Nacho, it's your turn. Yeah.
I was just gonna add, like, it seems like a lot of these issues could sort of be resolved by making sure everyone has like a core set of morals. Now, like, I'm a Christian, I'm not gonna push that on everybody, but I mean, you can still have a logical basis, like a base set of morals. Like, I've heard Destiny give his little 2 bits, and I actually heard this the other day, and I thought it was really based. So I'm gonna read it out because it's really short, but it's like, I exist, I have an experience, I want to maximize my experience. Other people exist, other people have experience, other people want to maximize their experience. Humans want to synergize. If I help them maximize their experience, they'll probably, help me maximize my experience as well. So it's like just having some core like morals I think could solve a lot of these issues as well. Because I mean, it would definitely, it could definitely help with solving issues like that. And then it could help with, you want to be forming. I mean, by default, you would be forming longer term relationships. I think in general, because you want to care about somebody, you want to, so, and then that would also solve the problem of like, you're not going to not know what this person is into or is not into if you like been dating them for a long time, you've been talking, you've been probably sexting or whatever, you're like talking about what you're into before you build up to that place. And so you kind of, without having to literally go through like the script of like, what are you into? I'm into this. Are you into this? Are you into this? Like really like you're at a corporate meeting or something and you're like showing them a PowerPoint, like and then signing a consent form, like you build a longer term relationship. That's my kind of more conservative take, I guess, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
Respected them if they're in a sound mind, right? If you respect other people the way you respect yourself, which is in hopefully a good manner, I think this wouldn't be that much of an issue.
In my opinion, I think the most valuable part of this conversation really was I don't remember her name, but like it was the girl's like seems that she was rather passionate about like sex politics.
Joe,
I think that
yes, that's
yeah,
right.
that's pretty based.
I think that the focus being on like just raw consent isn't productive at all. Like it leads to like a whole lot of weird legalese questions. Like I can say in personal experience, like I've had situations where like, hey, I didn't necessarily feel comfortable like having sexual intercourse with somebody just because of the fact that I was unsure about the consent situation. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
and all of this,
I would probably
feel
say
is
wait till
really,
marriage
it's not
I mean,
useful.
honestly,
You
like
have gone through an entire
having
lifetime,
experiences with other people, if honestly, if I'm being really honest, and I could take it all back
more important is just
and
generally
just
speaking,
experience that with
respecting
my
other
wife,
human
I would
beings,
totally be
also,
up
like
for that.
caring about their pleasure. All right.
A lot of people are like, no,
you
I
just
wouldn't take anything
understand the
back because
truth
it
of
would
like what
change my
somebody
experience of like
or
who I
like
am. That
whether
would
or
be the
not
one
they're
thing that
into
would
this.
most definitely
Even if you
change.
don't necessarily have that conversation beforehand, at least it's better than like say somebody who doesn't understand that or like or isn't focused on that and just does it irrespective of that. Like I feel as if that is far more of an important of a part of the conversation than like the
Thanks
consent
to the
part. I think
Christian, the
consent part,
derailed
I think like
conversation returns to
everybody
sanity.
kind of
Yeah,
understands
well,
like yeah,
short,
like
briefly.
this person says no, I shouldn't do it. The only
You would
people who
be
do it irrespective of
surprised.
that are the worst people in society.
Right.
You'd be surprised.
There are sexy ways of talking about what you're into, though. Like I'm like really into the BDSM community. I have my kinks, and a big part of that community is not just like debauchery and sex all the time. I mean, it's a lot of sex, but it's like it's a lot of respect and communication. So you're kind of hitting the nail on the head. But there is a lot of verbal communication that goes into that. Before you tie somebody up in a bunch of ropes, you really need to communicate what you're doing. You need to have all these. So
This is
there's different
terrible.
like encounters too, though. Like if you're meeting, God damn it, I'm gonna get drunk. I'll do this again. Like if you're meeting somebody just out like as a one night stand kind of thing, like at a bar. I'll use the bar as an example. You don't typically want to walk up and ask if things are okay. You should know because you have to meet this person out of nowhere and like
Oh my
I mean
gosh.
I don't know how y'all flirt and how y'all do things, but it's supposed to be really natural. Like it's supposed to be a flow. Like you might not hook up with them that night, but you might meet someone really cool, get their number, maybe go out later on in the week, and then maybe that leads to something. But there's still a lot of communication. I just think there's different forms of communication rather than talking. But certain scenarios need
Yeah, I don't know
clear
if I don't know
defined
if I
verbal
would say that I
communication because you're
feel
getting into things
bad.
that
I guess I just
potentially
feel
could be
like
dangerous
I
or
feel like it
hurtful.
would have been
So I mean,
I agree with that, but like just to touch on like an
I feel like it
example,
would have
like
been better for
as
me
somebody who spends a lot of time, all right,
like
public
wait, I
University
guess.
Houston. I mean, like there's a whole lot of
No,
downtime,
bronze.
all right, where it's like either just silence or like you don't know what to talk about because you may not necessarily have like same
Yeah,
classes,
well, this is
same things going on in your
not the
life
right
that you're into.
place.
All right, so these like say you're on the metro, say you're on the streetcar, say you're on the Uber, like these are
It's because
all
it's in TR in
moments that
chat.
are
He just
opportunities
assumes
to like
Republicans
just
racist. Well,
ask
too bad you got like
questions about that
the
person.
center
And it
right
doesn't need to like
borderline
again be like,
libtard in the
hey,
stream.
do
So
you want to sign this like contract to do
pretty
anal at least this exact
pretty
time
dead
for this amount
center.
of time? Like
So
no, you just be like, hey, like
but
I'm into
nice
this.
try,
And
I
like
guess.
generally there I know
That
guys
probably works
who've gotten
with
girls who are into that
some
type of
people who
thing
are on the far
because
right.
they just asked beforehand.
So
yeah, and communists in the
I
chat.
think
Yeah,
we've kind of crushed this topic, and it's something that we've done a lot on this channel, and I think it's good. I think it's a good topic to continuously do because this is an ongoing conversation. We need to have a cultural conversation. We got to change these attitudes, change these views, and I think this is always worthwhile. But I did want to engage before more people left. I wanted to engage with Charlotte on that states' rights thing because I thought it was really interesting what she said. We kept moving away from it, so I'm going to try to bring us back. But before then, hey, audience members, if you've been enjoying this conversation, right? These moments, these great moments.
All right, good. We get the shill.
That happened.
We get the PrimeCayes shill. You to take a break and read some chats. Is the tanky? Even the tanky is playing nice. See, yeah.
You never know what they will say. Unfortunately for me,
I don't even know if I consider communist a tanky. I think communist is a lot less left than he thinks he is. I don't know. It's just my opinion. Clock guy's definitely like literally dead center. Well, I don't know. He's like barely left because he's like left of me, and I probably am actually dead center. Keeping this channel afloat. That's why I tend to piss people off on the right and the left. Everybody hates me. Two individuals so far, and maybe more in the future to actually make this all happen. And then, even then, I spend hours and hours gauging the barometer of a fake. That can't happen. Okay, I don't know what support from individuals like you sitting at home. So, $5. I don't know what that's growing. So, if you sub to the channel, you will get our ad for viewing. Ruling for tankies is do you vote Dem? I voted, so I think they decide me. Yeah. Also, you get our emotes. Well, let's just emotes right there. Yeah, no, I know you guys don't, Sarah, but expanding online righties, okay, like, and not even like righties or like Republicans. Talking about like the further right, I guess. 6 months, say 30%. Yeah, rose tinted glasses is probably an appropriate description of me. Like, you can sell for free. There's still some core issues that keep me on the right. But I wasn't trying to. Just barely, really because I could still concede on some of the things, like on abortion. I could concede, like for emergencies and threatening the life of the mother, or like even I could even concede like rape and incest. I could even grant that. I just think abortion out of convenience is just wrong. I think there's too many ways of contraception, or like too many ways to prevent even getting pregnant in the first place. There's really no excuse. And now, if we wanted to try to make like condoms and other contraceptives even more available, sure, I'd be down for that. I just don't think abortion is right. I think just, but I don't know. And there's probably a couple other things, like just the fact that I'm Christian, more like traditional kind of, so it's like that's how I behave and that's how I live my life, but I don't know, I wouldn't feel comfortable like pushing that on other people. Like I wouldn't feel comfortable voting for any kind of policies that made it to where other people had to also be beholden to like those kind of traditional values or ideals or something. Like I think that's something that's more should be pushed in the social medium, I guess. So essay with 5, was it 5 gifted, gifted, yeah, unfortunately that's where I can admit that capitalism fails us sometimes, just because like that just because these things exist, just because of the fact that abortion exists and is like basically privatized, like this is like healthcare. Okay, our healthcare is privatized, and we have doctors that are performing abortions. Like that has to be in demand. So if we don't really care about getting contraception everywhere, like by default you're gonna basically have money trying to lobby to keep abortion in business, because if we made contraception more popular, there wouldn't be as high of a demand for abortion, therefore not as many abortions and not as many doctors getting paid to do these operations, and therefore they lose a lot of money and revenue. So whether it comes from being subsidized from the government or being paid for outright, yeah, it kind of like keeps itself alive, unfortunately. So it's just kind of like.
Help us out. This doesn't happen. All that the work that goes into that takes time. So we need your help. Thank you, Elf Fudge, Elf Fudge, for resubscribing. It's awfully kind of you.
Thanks, Chad. Okay.
Level 2 hype train. We got 4 minutes.
Dead center. Let me take the best. Both sides.
The hype train needs your help.
The left has shown very little little lately that is worth this shit. Yeah, there's one guy. Okay, I'll have to tell you guys this. There's one guy that I really appreciate, and I'm looking to try to get him on and have an interview with just me and him. I've been and I talked to him. We've been on a panel before, and I'd like to have like an interview, like a Joe Rogan style like interview where I just basically like chill and ask him questions. We talk about our life, and we just like humanize him, because he's basically like the Ben Shapiro of the left. Like, he's a fast talker. He's very knowledgeable, and he's like does his research, and he debates. His name is Destiny, but I end up agreeing with him on like a lot of issues, and I think it's because he really at the core is more independent. He just gets lumped in with the left, but he did vote Democrat, and he did help campaign for like the Democrats and to get Joe Biden elected. So it's like, I don't know, like there's some other things that we disagree on. Like, obviously I think that his moral system is basically like exactly what I believe, except mine is based in Christianity. So it's like, but yeah, I'm gonna try to have him on so we can talk, and I think you guys would actually like him. So we'll do like what my idea is to do like an interview, and then to do like a semi debate where I basically just question him about a lot of his positions and like generally, and then maybe we go into like a few things more in depth. But yeah, I like Destiny because he's really about policing the left. Like, he goes after all the crazy SJWs and like the far left, the Antifas. Like, he calls all of them out, and he's like, you're idiots for being so radical. He calls out ACAB. He's even called out Black Lives Matter to some extent before. Like, he calls out all the violence and all this stuff, and he gets in these panels and he just crushes these people. And then he does the same thing to the far right too. So it's like the Nick Fuentes and everybody else, like, he goes after them. So I mean, I don't know. Honestly, it's like, it feels weird because I'm like, it's like, I feel like a lot of our positions are almost exactly the same, because somehow he ended up on the left and I ended up like somewhat right. And so I want to try to pin down what those few issues are, because on most everything else we tend to agree. So, but yeah, so if you haven't checked them out, you should go check out some of the.
Oh no, I don't know if I would like that.
Some of the. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I was trying to reach out, but yeah. So if you haven't checked them out, you should go check out Destiny on Twitch and on YouTube. You would probably like them.
I don't know if you guys have ever had like Darth Dawkins on here. It'd be pretty hilarious, but like a very circular.
He's pretty smart. A little beta though. Oh yeah. Yeah, Jesse. Yeah, he was on Jesse Lee Peterson. It's pretty funny. Beta. Yeah. Oh yeah. So there's a few. There's definitely more that we would disagree on. Like, he's like in a polyamorous, like open relationship ish thing. I don't know. I would definitely disagree on that. I don't know. So like, yeah, and his moral system is just, but it's like he came out of a Catholic background, so he's actually based all of his morals from Christianity. So he's like, you know, I don't know. It's weird, but yeah. So we're that's in the works. So we'll see.
SA being so kind. Thank you for gifting 2,500 bits to the channel, which would be $25 to you, Big Do. But thank you for gifting.
Yeah, I think more people are closer to the center than, and I think both of the parties don't really represent either like the majority of the population at this point anymore. Like there's a lot of problems with both parties, which is why I don't like to blame one or the other. Like I work with Republicans locally, but that's just because that's who's going to get the job done around here. So
support from individuals like SA and Top Dolphin, and who else? Scrolling back.
Dang, he's still going, dude.
Who else helped out this hype train? Other people did, like Infinite Indivisibility, Smite Nite.
Yeah, so I'm more about like actually trying to find some prescriptive solutions to these things, which means you have to talk to the left, and we have to try to find a way to like, I don't know, like coagulate this open wound that is politics right now, and kind of heal this divide, this rift. So you know.
You're not messing around.
Real quick, if I drop all of a sudden,
I think we can do it though.
It's kind of like an emergency. So, but if I just like randomly
2%, yeah, the 2% is louder. That's the problem. Yeah, those people are extremely loud. So.
Wow, that's really kind of you. Really kind of you. Gifting 10 hot tier 1 gift subs to the channel. So we are. I think we're still at level. Now we're at level 4 hype train. We have.
I feel like Bronze Age Chad has come in here before and done this, if I'm not mistaken. I don't really know what you're on about, but I mean, whatever. He can say whatever he wants, as long as he's not like spamming racial slurs or like doing weird stuff. Whatever. I don't know what he's talking about though. I'm really confused.
With Dylan proving that he is the source of all evil on Twitch. And in case you missed it again, I'm going to be on Dylan's panel on Friday for the Tippy championship type thing. I've never been there before. I think I'm arguing against Vosh. I don't have high hopes for myself. But it's going to be a lot of fun. But those great moments don't happen on other channels. They happen here. This is a very unique channel on Twitch, right? The other channels who do Twitch politics, and they're great channels. Other great channels out there who do politics here on Twitch, but none of them allow this open space where audience members like you, yes, you sitting at home, can be a part of it, right? And so if you want to continue that content, need your help. Need your help to do this. To come up with these topics is tough, right? Scheduling these individuals is extremely tough. If you've never done it before, I don't suggest you ever do it in your life. It's terrible. It's heart wrenching scheduling people to come on these things. To getting those big guests, right? It takes time to get those big guests to come on. So to help us out, please donate to the channel. Sub to the channel. Sub right now. Sub right now. Again, you won't have to worry about those pesky ads anymore, because we don't do that. Essay, thank you for getting out another hot tier 1 gift sub to Smite Knight, who was so kind as to help us out previously. Yes, thank you so much. We are at 26% of level 4 hype train. Can we get to level 5? Essay gifting another hot tier 1 gift sub to a Life on the Couch. Yes, Life on the Couch also being helpful, helping all the small donators. Yes, and it doesn't matter if you're a small donator, right? If you can donate a lot or a little.
He's trying to keep this hype train going, so I gotta respect the grind, dude. I'd be doing the same thing, dude. Sometimes you just gotta chill, man. Trying to make that money.
Going and growing. So, what else? And you've, of course,
speaking of money, we're on the Republican Nation. If you're not already following it on Twitch, you need to follow. And if you're not subscribed, you should subscribe to the Republican Nation on Twitch, because at the end of the week, this week, Friday, we are doing a $1,000 giveaway. So the Republican Nation, not me, AmericanNacho, although you can subscribe to me if you want. That would be much appreciated. But on Friday, we are doing a subscriber drawing and $1,000 giveaway. Whether it's Venmo, PayPal, CashApp, however we figured out, Jace is giving away $1,000 to a random subscriber on Friday. So you can subscribe for, I think, $4, and then you can cancel it if you want after instead of renewing it in 30 days. But if you want to try to win $1,000 on Friday, so you just have to be subscribed by Friday, and then on Friday show up. Well, I don't know what time he's planning on doing it Friday. He usually goes live at around 12 p.m. So yeah, if you guys want to be a part of that, come by and subscribe before or on Friday to the Republican Nation on Twitch.
One-on-one debates that have been asked for previously. Thank you. Wow, Anonymous. Are you the same Anonymous from, what was it, Saturday? Thank you, Anonymous, for gifting 30. Count them 30 Hot Tier 1 gift subs to the channel. Holy crap,
Wow.
Anonymous. Holy crap. And thank you, PB Success, for gifting 200 or something. I don't know. You gave a random amount, but thank you.
200 plus 1 plus 3 plus 1 plus 2.
Okay, thank you for that.
Nice.
Very much appreciated. I think that's it. We completely a level 5 hype train. Thank you.
I gotta dip, man. I love y'all.
Thank you for being here.
But congrats on the hype train, man. Big ups.
Really appreciate it. Okay, thank you so much, whoever that anonymous gifter is. I think it is the same person from last time. I don't know who you are. I don't know why you're helping, but it's so appreciated. Very much needed. So thank you, anonymous, whoever you are out there, for supporting this channel. I have a suspicion as to who you might be, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Before we wrap this up, just gotta take a moment to thank my top 5 donators. So we gotta thank, of course, Leah. This is Leah Incorporated. We are proud members and proud employees of Leah's organization.
I'm a lefty. That's perfectly fine, Bronze.
This month, just 1 month. 505, and I think 1,300 lifetime on this channel. SA for gifting 70. Thank you, SA. One of our newer monsters here, one that we very much appreciate. Sport Guy with 50. Second Star with 45. Tuchel with 22. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Tuchel 22 with 35 subs. And in terms of bits, SA keeping the top spot, amazing, with 18,900 bits. Leah with 15,000 bits. Second Star tied with Leah with 15,000 bits. Who would ever thought that was possible? Leah, our local monster here. Todd Byron with 11,700 bits. And our dear departed friend, Tom Foolery with 11,001 bits. Thank you all to my top donors for keeping this channel alive. Doesn't happen without individuals just like you and the smaller donors out there. If you're gifting just 100 bits, yeah, it means a lot. Keeps this channel up and running. Thank you. And I'm done. All right. Sorry, I had to make the money.
Congrats, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Successful hype train.
From now on, you should do that Shane McMahon WWE song, the money song.
Money.
Okay, all right, let's get back at it. And Red Shroud had to leave. That's unfortunate. And Savitar, you're here. Maybe you'll be good for this conversation as well. I wanted to talk about states' rights and whether they're important or not. So I'm curious what you all have to say about this. But Red Charlotte had mentioned that she doesn't care about states' rights at all. And is that a common feeling here?
I really
no.
Well, if you want to ask Savitar first, but I see a lot of value in states' rights, but not from like the weird I'm only going to apply states' rights arbitrarily as an argument as to when it benefits my side politically, but more so in the fact that like I think it holds the fabric of the country together in a way.
States as in the United States, or like states as like international relations?
United States.
To an extent, I believe states' rights should be limited to just general governance infrastructurally within the state itself. So just very vague general stuff to apply to maybe the unique geography of the area, so on and so forth. But when it comes to important things that, again, it's all about utility. When it comes to human rights, when it comes to education, military, so on and so forth, national security, I would just say, nah, fuck your states' rights. You gotta do what we say.
I would agree with that. I really think that states' rights are pretty.
Do that.
No, we don't actually. To an extent, I want
excluding education, obviously, where states have like
healthcare, electricity, because that's decentralized in a lot of states like Texas, as we've clearly seen.
Now, right?
Taxes to an extent as well.
most tax collection is done by the IRS. But yeah, obviously you could for in Canada,
The
for
IRS is
example,
poorly funded.
Yeah, I agree. But like Canada, for example, which is where I live, all right, and it serves as a parallel in a lot of situations. At least the CRA here, they handle basically all the taxes, excluding like in Quebec. So I see utility and value in like say having the IRS just handle it because it's way more simple. Okay, like having a
Well, what
state
do we mean by
revenue.
states' rights? Like, what do
By
like
states'
states' rights to do what?
I mean that like the state has the right to have jurisdiction, okay, or like power over a specific area. And sometimes, like at least in the case of the United States, oftentimes it's a blend of the two.
To
Whereas
what
like
extent do they have power over like this area? So like I agree to a certain extent. Like the
certain
concept of
aspects, I think they should have sole
municipalities and provinces
jurisdiction
are
over.
cool. In what ways though? So like when you mean jurisdiction, I mean government
Well, when I
jurisdiction?
say sole
Sure.
jurisdiction, I mean like more so like say how we handle municipal governments or like the structure that they exist in. I think that because they're like creations or like creatures of the state that are created by them, I feel as if like that should be handled by them, obviously. Like the creation of municipal governments, like the creation of these types of things, or like
Yeah, counties
county
and stuff like
government.
that. Sure, that should be
Yeah,
100%
so like
handled by the
obvious things like
states.
that, I think we can agree upon. But like I think more so there's obviously nuance in healthcare. Like in healthcare, for example, like the Canadian healthcare system is comparably, at least to the United States, rather decentralized. Medicare is like this big overarching federal agency that essentially handles a whole lot of things. And it seems as if that's the way that like healthcare is most efficiently done in America. Thus, all right, great. I see a lot of utility in like giving the federal government more power over that. But things like, I don't know, maybe public transport. I don't necessarily know, all right, if the federal government would be the best agency to handle that.
So
why would transport be good for the states if transport goes across states?
Yeah.
Like how would you handle like interstate like railways?
Across the country.
So transport goes across states, but oftentimes most commutes are in between states. Or I mean, within like either near local states or like within the state itself. The super majority, I'm sure, of transit is within the state itself. So I mean, like obviously, it's just where we draw the borders. Like Amtrak can exist because the federal government can own railways. All right, but like, would I want Amtrak to suddenly like I don't know own the MBTA? No.
I think federally owned railways is a good idea, though, to a great extent. I mean,
No, I don't disagree with that. What I'm saying is that, like, I wouldn't want the federal government to control the MBTA, which, for any, just like Massachusetts is like transit system essentially, like for the
yeah. I mean, but
major
you're just agreeing with me though that like when it comes to general governance, municipal government, infrastructure of the state itself to an extent, that's okay. Then we get into like overall utility when it comes to things like energy or things that we believe ought to be human rights. That's when we say, no, fuck your state's rights. The federal government's going to step in, and if you go against us, we will put our boot right on your fucking throat.
There's a difference between like.
Think that, oh, sure. Go ahead.
There's a difference between like delegating like different tasks to different states, or saying like, okay, like to say like some of these smaller things are better done by smaller like ordinances. But it still isn't a states' rights thing because like the federal government could still conceivably come in and override that. Like why should like the federal government not have the ability to override like the states' wills in those things if it's like deemed necessary to do so?
Well, because of the fact that like oftentimes I think that like the federal government, or at least maybe stereotypically, often has a more top-down viewpoint of things and loses quite a lot of the nuance, right, in communities. And as such, I think that like these types of places should be able to govern themselves, and we should empower them to the best that we can to like have jurisdiction over their own communities, wherever we possibly can. But where in situations where it's clearly just not working or it's less efficient, absolutely not. The federal government should step in.
So I think you said something. A few things that are really interesting. So I like when you started off saying that like you're for states' rights, but like at least whether you're for or against it, like we should be consistent with it and not just when it's like benefits our team. So
yeah,
fair enough. Okay, but on the other side of that, states' rights actually meant something very particular within American politics, right? In terms of, in terms of
Sorry,
being
guys,
able to impose racist laws upon.
I'm just looking up a few things.
Localities upon within southern states, like yes, we should have the right to decide our own affairs, right? So states' rights, but that, and then that kind of morphed into other things. But in the heart of it, it was about being able to discriminate, right? and keeping the federal government out of it.
Yeah, like, it was one of the first dog whistles, essentially, wasn't it? Like,
oh, I'm sure there were more before then, but it's a very common.
Or like,
yeah. Welfare and states' rights were like
really big
some of the biggest dog whistles were the first ones to come up.
Definitely within a modern context, though, I'd say one of the original.
It's such a weird topic to tackle because there's so much implied already. When you're talking about states' rights in this regard, you're already assuming this entire federal structure for which there are subordinate structures.
Okay. Yeah. So what?
We're not getting into this anarchist meme, dude.
That's a whole bunch of assumption.
But
yes, I do in fact presume that the federal government exists because I get a bill, and it's pretty big.
So okay, but
Prime, I gotta go.
Okay.
I gotta go to work. Thank you for having me.
We would love to have you again, Paul. You were a lot of fun. Please come back. Yeah, we were definitely welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll most.
Okay. So, I think he was going to say something else.
Left halfway through.
But Savitar, right? On that
Hello?
anarchist meme, on that particular anarchist meme, the point I was going to make is that we do a common anarchist take is that it's best to have government that is closer to the people, right? The more closer the government is to the people, the more like democratic it is, right? And so, and that'd be having smaller and smaller governmental structures, right? Like regional governments. So, if that being the municipal government, right? You have more democracy within that, and then blowing it up to the state government and then the federal government. But each step removed you are from the actual people, the farther you're away from these decisions and being able to affect these decisions. There's value in that, right? And that simply having a smaller unit to govern people. Do you think so, Savitar?
To an extent, sure. Like it could be far more efficient to just have a smaller unit closer to the people. But again, that's generally speaking for average, ordinary things. But when it comes to, as you said, human rights or important issues to deal with wide sweeping problems within the society itself, such as police reform, race relations, religion relations with one another, fundamental moral differences in values, or fundamental differences in moral values, sorry. These things, I think, need to be handled by the federal government. And damn what the states say, you will do what the federal government says, because I don't care how many racists there are within your state. They don't get to oppress black people because they're racist.
That's not.
But
so
you're painting a picture where everything that the states do is bad, and everything the federal government does.
Right. So
I literally
a lot of our
literally said it's okay for them to do like the general, normal, everyday act of governance. That's something they ought to be able to do because it's more efficient there. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, but so much of our federal policy,
the federal government be able to do.
So the issue with what I see Savitar saying is that, like, I think we all agree, generally speaking, obviously the federal government where, like,
oh my gosh, man, honestly,
the
just
issue is
shut up.
When perhaps the federal government just does the wrong thing, and oftentimes when they make these big overarching policies, it affects everybody. Everybody gets fucked. Okay, so versus, like, say if a state, all right, decides to do some sort of policy, not necessarily everybody gets fucked. So we can minimize the amount of fuckery that occurs in the country in certain ways. Sometimes we're not having, like, the federal government, and Republicans, keep in mind here, do exist at the federal level, in power there.
Are you okay with the states just fucking themselves over? Like, can we just say implement good policy at the federal level? Plus, the federal government is less likely to be wrong in the first place because by nature of
I don't know about that.
I don't know.
But by nature of encompassing a greater number of people, it's gonna be more likely to arrive at the majority opinion, which is more likely to be correct.
But maybe the majority.
The majority opinion is most likely to be correct. I don't agree with that.
Mob intelligence.
Hold on 1 second. Please let Rox finish the point. I want to go to Nacho, who's been waiting very patiently. Then Rage, then PB.
it's this concept of mob intelligence. Like on average, people are correct. Any individual person might not be, but the more people you add, the less likely you are for the collective group to be
Well,
wrong.
It's not my stream.
So the federal government is more likely to be
I'm a
correct
guest on someone
by
else's
virtue of
panel
encompassing
right
more
now.
people.
Well, I just don't
Kevin.
believe that morals have truth value, so that means like.
So Prime is this
that's
guy
why I
right here.
disagree
Prime
entirely.
is the host right now.
Okay, so we'll move on, but I just want to say this one thing because this is what I've been trying to get out for a while. In terms of fuck, don't tell me I just forgot it. Holy shit, I'm gonna be really frustrated myself.
Did your brain not get primed for it?
Sorry,
you need
what?
to cease and desist.
Oh, fuck, it was shit. It was about. God damn it! Fuck, something I've been trying to get out to Avatar for a while. What Big Dude brought up, right? Like in terms of being consistent with this, right? So you listed Sevatar, you listed a whole bunch of things that I agree with, and you already know what I agree with. I'm like, when it comes to civil rights, maybe don't lead up to fucking states because they prove themselves to be really fucking untrustworthy, right? But can we come up with a consistent rule about that, right? Consistent rule as to when to do this. And on the other side of the ledger is that states are considered the laboratory of democracy, right? Which is a really kind of corny term, but it's actually proven useful, right? So we've seen, like, for instance, California lead the way in like environmental laws or something, right? When its regulation has been far ahead of everyone else. And in fact, it's affected the rest of the country because it happens to be such a big buyer of like cars and stuff. So since California makes that rule, then everyone gets that rule, right? So, like, isn't there also value in having states be able to on certain matters? And
I've already said multiple times it's okay for states to like have precedent over certain matters within like a federalist system. Like there's
rules, as I'm asking, like,
you know what?
A consistent like how do we know which things are okay to intercede in and which things are not, to be consistent?
Just from again, this would just go back to like the hedonic calculus and whether or not like certain issues would provide more utility in one case versus another. It would just be about what's your certain goal in a given context for like infrastructure, for example. What would be the most efficient way to, or
Yeah,
a better example?
I don't know what's going on in the chat.
Welfare,
so sorry
like
if I'm not
welfare
seeing
distribution within a given society.
that.
Generally speaking, the federal government is going to have a lot more efficient way of giving out welfare to people.
That was
just state governments,
this year. I don't
government,
know what happened.
just more resources that can move more efficiently than any state government possibly do, with maybe the exception of California. California's kind of a special case within the United States because of just how big and prosperous it is.
What are you saying, Bronze? You'll get banned.
There's an
If
economy
you start
of scale
saying things
diminishing
like
returns
that. I don't know what this is supposed to be.
Oh, well,
I mean that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, almost always having like an entire population, all right, focused on a particular task is almost always going to be like better than like or more efficient with regards to economies of scale when compared to that of like just an individual state. But like obviously there are diminishing returns. Like once you pass like perhaps like literal entire country of Canada.
I don't know what's
level,
being said, but I just saw
like,
Goy,
the
and we're not
efficiency might
going
not be
there.
as much as like comparing Vermont to other places. But like I think
This
the
is
main
one of those
point is
like
that, the federal government can't be wrong,
like Jewish
and the states can
supremacy
be wrong
takes or
too.
something is
So
just gonna
what
like pop out of you. I
solution
don't want to hear it.
harm? And I think if the federal government makes some sort of fucky policy, even though they oftentimes just refrain from
You
making
saw
policy
that.
in the
I
first
don't
place,
know.
all right. Again, the point is that like it will affect almost everybody, almost
I don't know.
definitely,
It's
because the federal government typically doesn't like say
happening
if they
here.
decide to set a minimum wage, it needs to be $15. It needs
This
to be
I don't know. Someone in
$15
the Twitch
everywhere. It
chat
needs
is
to be
just
$12
getting
everywhere.
weird.
What if instead, all right, I understand the fact that like oftentimes states aren't in the correct form of government, but even considering the fact that they aren't in the correct form of government, or aren't doing this the correct thing, okay, at least it's only affecting that population.
Let's go to Nacho's been waiting, and then on Nacho Rage PB Ty Woms. Okay, let's go.
So I was just gonna make a lot of the same points that Prime was making. Like I feel like the states' rights are essential to like the development of our federal policies, because like they allow us to experiment with things like healthcare and UBI, which you've seen like a lot of states doing. With, like he was saying, environmental regulations, with making college education cheaper, college education. Even like the small town where I'm at, they offer like if you graduate from the high school, you automatically get to go to the local community college for like 2 years. And I think a lot of places do that. Like on a local level, you get to experiment with a lot of things and provide and kind of like those things tend to influence policy at a federal level, because then they can look to these states and they can look to these counties and say like, hey, look, well, this is what worked here and this is what worked there. So maybe we can find somewhere in the middle, and we can we can use these examples to adapt policies. And I mean, there's been a lot of benefit, I think, from allowing states to basically have free reign and do the things they did. I mean, yeah. So I think it covered like. Yeah, UBI healthcare, free college, environmental regulations, and I added free black citizens in there just for the memes. But I mean, it's a thing.
Right.
It's a thing that started with states' rights.
The
So
issue is that like we're operating under the presumption that like the current U.S. federal government structure is like a necessity, when in reality, like a few minor changes, and we could absolutely implement some like reforms that we'd see as impossible today. Like simple things such as making Washington D.C. a state, okay, and restoring the Voting Rights Act would have like a massive effect on like what types of policy we'd be able to influence. And oftentimes I feel as if we just see the federal government as like this rock that's like movable, when like it perfectly well is. These types of reforms, or big reforms that people like to talk about, are all things that could be achieved if we just made some other minor reforms, and we wouldn't need to have state governments be essentially constantly be like these weird little like test grounds for each and every single policy that we make, even though they are like a good means of or that would be a good means of testing our policies.
and also just to tack on really quickly, I forgot to add in it helps kind of keep like the federal government in check as well, because we have the option to secede, I guess. So. Technically, okay, technically. So
you have the option of a violent revolution, I suppose.
Technically,
you
I guess.
have the option to get violently put down.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much that.
But that's the idea, right? You, as the states, you're supposed to be able to have some influence over the federal government and not allow them to get to.
Hey man, all I gotta say is a way down south in the land of traitors.
Goddamn right.
Rattlesnakes and alligators. I don't know if I can see that on Twitch actually.
Maybe not. Let's go to Rage.
Mute that.
No, it's fine. Rage, PB, Ty, Womps, and then Rocks. I see your hand up. Oh, and Wordy.
I would just echo the what was it? The experiments. You said what was the term that you said, Prime? Because I've heard it before about the democracy.
Laboratory of democracy.
Laboratory of democracy. Yes. I do think there's utility in that. One of the things that comes to mind is like the federal policy on drugs, especially like marijuana, is not ideal. And then but individual states have been able to either decriminalize or legalize it, or some took the route of like the legalizing medicinal uses of marijuana. I think that there is utility to having the states being able to do things that the federal government isn't essentially ready to do. Another example, I don't know all the logistics of the term sanctuary cities, but like having the states being able to, I guess there's a conflict there between like certain states, like I guess California has sanctuary cities, and the federal government's policy on immigration. But I think there is utility in that, because maybe the federal government's policy on immigration is just bad, and so you can have states who say, well, no, we're going to treat our immigrants differently than the federal government says. Not similarly, but in addition to that, I also think there's utility in having, as it was said before, the rule, like not the rulers, but like the people who govern more closely and locally related. While I do understand that states are not always right, and so you can't say, oh, states' rights is always the best rights. I'm heavily in favor of people being able to control their local community. If they are violating other people's like liberties, like let's say like civil rights, and for instance, then I think we can appeal to the Constitution, and if the Constitution isn't right, then we should amend it to be right. But like when it comes to liberties of that order, then we can bring in the federal government. But for a lot of things, I think that we should let local communities, cities, states be able to control what goes on. Like, another
don't even know
example
what nightmare
before
is. I
I
don't
give
know
up the
if
time.
Do you think states should
right
have
or
to deal
not,
with
but
abortion?
the communists and the right wing getting
It should be
along.
up to states to decide
I don't
whether
know.
or not like it's a woman's right to have an abortion
Seems
or
like
not.
a good thing though.
I think we ended up deciding that on the federal level. We put it through the Supreme Court and went to the federal level. So I think there's what is it? It's
Yeah, but
called
I'm asking
precedent.
you. I'm
The
asking
Supreme
you.
Court doesn't legislate, by the way.
Yes, it does. Case law does
It
legislate.
does
You're
not.
wrong.
It does not.
Yes, it
That's
does.
not
You're wrong.
Salvatore.
Your opinion's wrong because
Snooze fest.
case law determines interpretation and application of law.
Prime, who's that one guy? Who's that one law student that comes on and like brings up case law all the time?
Pisco, he's in the chat.
Pisco, yeah.
So,
Get him in
come
here.
and just like bounce on this kid.
Come on, Pisco.
Whether or not it's legislation will change in like that.
No,
Do you
literally.
realize that legislation doesn't it just extend to creation of law? It also extends to the interpretation and application of law. So
Please get in here,
basically
Pisco.
making a reductionist argument here.
But technically, all the decisions only apply to the case at hand.
Okay.
Technically,
No.
Did you know that abortion was case law?
Standards.
Did you know gay marriage was case law?
Rights, please.
Just mute him.
I take mock
Yeah,
trial.
let's move back to states' rights. So, like, I think we agree, generally speaking, on states' rights that states should have general quote unquote soft sovereignty within their own borders to a certain extent, as long as they're not doing some really dumb shit.
There he is.
There we go.
We
You say
threw
his
up the
name
bat
3 times.
signal.
You say that states can't, or that the Supreme Court doesn't make law, and then he will appear, dude. Anyway,
I'm sick.
You wanna educate this young anarchist on what the Supreme Court actually has the power to do, just like how.
I mean, I think you guys are having a bit of a inane argument here. Frankly, it's a bit of a formalist argument about whether something is quote unquote law or not. I will say he did say something that was stupid, which was, whatever the decision is only affects the parties before them. There is this notion of like, certain holdings can only affect the litigants in certain cases, but there are exceptions to that rule. And of course, any precedent that you establish is, controlling, at least in the Supreme Court sense, to all lower courts on the specific issue. So I would say, if I'm being honest, the Supreme Court doesn't hand down legislation, but it certainly, what it says about the law is what the law is. And so
policy, just not like necessarily legislation.
Yeah, so a great example of this actually ties it back to the original conversation. I think it's Johnson versus Michigan, which has to do, which is a precedent I think set by the Supreme Court and was upheld in a ruling in 2020 that states have the right to enforce vaccinations onto their population through various laws, of course. And I think that's a great thing that the federal government in general should probably do, especially in modern day United States. They should make legislation to enforce vaccination and or other sort of mandates to deal with this pandemic. Because what other states such as Texas and Florida is doing is really fucking stupid, costing a lot of lives and money, and should probably be stopped.
Minimize some of the things.
So there's also been Supreme Court cases to the contrary, where they upheld bodily autonomy, and being forced to inject anything would be a violation of such.
Sorry, buddy, but like the Johnson versus Michigan one upheld.
So there are some instances, for example, I believe like
religious,
like religious exemptions based on like Jehovah's Witnesses.
Sure, and those eventually as well.
So
wait. To respond to that real quick, when it comes to blood transfusions, that was actually gotten rid of. That was primarily the Hasidic community or Semitic community. It's a Jewish community in New York, I'm pretty sure, that started that, but it was all over the United States at one point. That blood transfusion exemption was taken out of, at least for children, because we eventually came to the conclusion that, denying a blood transfusion to your dying child is child neglect. And if you do that, the CPS will be knocking down your door really fucking quickly. I think we should do the exact same thing with vaccines. If you don't vaccinate your child, you are neglecting your child, and CPS should come in.
So hold on, before we move too far.
I can bring it up to you.
Just DM me it.
Yeah. So okay, that was Rage. Then PB, Ty, Wompt, Rocks, Wordy. PB.
I think. Wait, Rage, you're finished, right?
I mean, I had one more thing, but it was just about minimum wage.
Are you sure?
Well, I was just going to say that I think that minimum wage shouldn't be like, you can have a federal wage, but it shouldn't be like a minimum wage. I think it should be like a minimum wage, but it shouldn't be like a federal wage. I think that minimum wage should be like, you can have a federal wage, federal minimum wage, but I think that we should pay attention to the different costs of living and like everything that goes on in different locations.
Oh boy, that's a separate fight. All right, let's go to PD.
Yeah. So I just wanted to represent an anarchist perspective, and I'm not sure what that other position that was labeled anarchist was. Not sure it would even be considered anarchist, but just because anarchists are ultimately have the values of like considering the nation state to be an unjust institution. It's not that like you would ask for it to be eliminated tomorrow. Like
thanks for hanging out, man.
That's not a really coherent position. And so even just advocating for decentralization, like just schematically,
heck, Robin.
It doesn't really make sense in this context too, because by giving like a state within the United States is still a hierarchical entity, and it's couched within like a larger one, and so you're just rearranging.
He's like, dude, I have a piano. I've definitely been
authority
late
is
before.
within
Like,
still
I don't know what this guy's talking about.
Hierarchical structure. It's like
He's
when
like, look at my Adam's
a
apple,
state
dude.
breaks up into multiple states. It's not necessarily that like
wear a mask.
The world got more anarchist just because there were more
free Palestine,
more decentralization.
How do you address what I'm sure is the concern from people like Sevatar, which is that decentralization, in many cases it can be a boon. I think Rage mentioned in situations in which experimentation, among other policy goals, can be bettered by having split the atom of sovereignty. But how do you address concerns by Sevatar that decentralization can cause huge problems, like in the context of the pandemic? If you're proposing a more disparate and less hierarchical structure where there's even less uniform action and more problems with respect to collective action problems, how do you address those kind of global threats?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll get to the pandemic thing. I'll start with saying that I'm a pragmatic person and take things by case basis. Some things make sense for the states to have the authority here, and there's better outcomes when the federal government has the authority here. Like as an anarchist, I support Social Security and I support things like federal jobs programs and stuff, but I also support things like if the outcome is that the states have more authority and there's a better outcome, then I'm for that. So just like
ask why.
Whatever the easiest way to get to the part where everyone is vaccinated, let's just go with that. Like,
so then where does the anarchy come in? I mean, you say you're an anarchist.
Yeah. Can I respond? Because I'm also an anarchist.
Okay,
I can help provide some aspect here. So you see, as an anarchist, what we fundamentally are
battle of the anarchists.
State. We aren't against government and organization itself. So, like, for example, the institutions of vaccination, the institutions of like the CDC would be a good thing under an anarchist organization. But what happens is we want to take away the monopolistic violence aspect of hierarchy.
I'll give up my passport before I get the mark of the
idea
beast.
Of having organizations that exist to like research vaccines, produce vaccines, those are good things. But we want to remove the ability to enact violence on citizenry.
Yeah, like I don't believe in sticking the cops on someone for not complying, even though it might be,
I can't hear you at all.
So these would exist only as advisory organizations, though. They wouldn't exist as like organizations that have any force behind what their actions are, right?
Force isn't the only way to
Samoa.
But what I'm saying is these organizations under an anarchist system would be only advisory in nature.
Yeah. Like organizations would only be advisory, but collectively we would all organize and like social pressures, like pressurize like our fellow citizens into like taking the vaccines. Like,
don't admit someone to university unless they're vaccinated. That kind of policy.
Yeah.
Pisco, why do you do this to me?
What do you mean? What I do to you?
Essentially, like,
trying to talk about federalism, you got them down to anarchy again. God damn it, dude!
It's called the true state.
This is the battle of the true anarchist.
I want to. Yeah, I never asked the question if we are okay with federalism, right?
Talking about states' rights.
I haven't asked that.
No, we didn't.
Federalism is decentralized government. So like at the end of the day, like if you get rid of the federal government and then like just have a bunch of states, they all likely would like easily be unitary government or like some sort of like confederacy or like federal government. Like most countries fit
Is this
within like
guy
on some sort of spectrum between
calling
like
for
the two, like
the
between
Confederate
confederacy,
to
which
come
would
back?
typically be like the least
Confederate
centralized,
government?
and then like unitary, which would be like, you know, basically just one
Why,
country.
why are you trying to set up a binary?
It's a
So
spectrum, my
it's not
dude.
a
He's not setting a
Oh my
binary. He's
dude.
explicitly making it not a binary, and he's saying
No,
that
no,
there's.
but by saying a dichotomy between decentralized and centralized government, that's creating a binary.
Well, what else could it be? I
But
mean, something
no,
is.
but like governments
I never
exist
said
across
it was
the spectrum.
centralized in the first
Yeah,
place.
he said that.
You could
He's introducing the spectrum.
It's not even a spectrum. They're all different. You can't place them on a line. There is no continuum.
Oh my god! This is a bit this is a bit bad faith, I think, take of his position and his outline. He's just saying that, you know, governments are more or less centralized. I don't know how you can take issue with that fact.
Yeah,
I'm independent, by the way.
Rather than not be.
Not that matters.
You
I
could
vote in the moment.
in any given
Yeah,
form
that's kind
or
of that's
structure
pretty
of
much
people, whether it be
where I'm at, I
your
guess. What's up,
household,
Karen?
whether it be
I mean,
your
I'm
wife, your
I'm voting for a
family,
lot of
relatives,
like
or
I'll be
your
voting Republican
relationship,
probably
with the entire
this
country as a
coming.
whole or a
It just
nation.
depends. Like I usually vote bipartisan
At the
anyways.
end of the day,
Like on
you
my
have a spectrum
local
between, like,
elections, I voted
who
bipartisan.
has like the keys to power, essentially within any given society.
But yeah, I don't
Okay?
like.
Often
I don't want to
no,
give
no,
one
no.
party too much power at this point. I think it's really dangerous. I
What?
think neither
Just-
of the parties
I mean, no one
represent
has the
us.
right to
I
have
look like
those
I've already
views.
said, and
Okay, great.
Rights don't
I would be
matter
happy
here.
to see another
What gives somebody right?
based
At the end of the
third
day,
party
that's
pop
power.
up and
So it
just
doesn't
kind of
matter. It doesn't
bring some
matter.
diversity to the table.
We're
So
moving away from the subject again.
But yes, this is kind of derailing from the subject. So like, why don't we just keep it like anarchist memes? At the end of the day, aside, like I don't see for us to what the relevant distinction here is. Like I feel as if like an anarchist society could be federal. Could it not also be like unitary? Like with regards to
No,
its government structure?
It could not be federal.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
why
Sorry.
do you-
We'll work it out.
define
We'll work
it
it out.
as
Stop. We'll work it out later. Go ahead, Ty. I know you really wanted to get on the subject, so go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This conversation comes into two different calculus. The first one is just like the efficiency calculus, what works well on the large scale, what works well on the small scale. I'll give you infrastructure tends to work very well on the large scale. That's your interstates. Idaho can't build the interstates by itself. It needs everybody else to be together to build that out, to fund it, to pay for it, that kind of thing. On the other side of this is that there's some things that I would argue that are just better at it. And I know I'm going to get against you, Prime, on this one, but minimum wage really is a lot better on the local level, in my opinion. And then the other side of this is that there is there's a moral and ethical value judgment here, right? Because if you say, all right, the state can get away with this or that, it can come in direct confrontation with what you believe is the right thing to do. So you might have something going right in your state that you think needs to be spread out to the rest of the union, but doesn't go vice versa. Abortion, anyone? It's one of those deals where this largely just falls into, can you withstand? Can you tolerate? Literally, this is the principle of tolerance. Can you tolerate people having political laws and theory that are violating of your moral and ethical framework?
But not to mention that I see
No.
value in the fact that like, hey, if the federal government, okay, or like any sort of like state government makes a fucky policy, at the end of the day, people can move. Obviously, like you can move away from the United States, but it's a lot harder to pull off. Okay, so within the current structure, if like say Georgia creates a law that you disagree with, there's always the opportunity to move to Alabama, always the opportunity to move to Massachusetts.
That's a stupid argument. I mean,
who
who cares about that? You're yeah, it is dumb because you're incurring transaction costs regardless. If first of all, as a matter of just practicality, a lot of these people can't move or won't because of other collateral circumstances.
The black population like moved from the south essentially up north because of the fact that they were being oppressed.
As a matter of practicality, I'm just letting you know, not everyone can move. And furthermore, regardless of regardless of whether or not everyone can move, they incur transaction costs by their leaving, which are felt
disagreeing with that.
Okay, which are felt by everybody. So
that doesn't exist with regards to the federal government.
So it would be but it would be better to have the right policy in the first in the first
No
instance,
shit.
and to not incur those transaction costs.
No
And
shit.
so saying you can just move
Just so you
ignore
guys
is an
know,
excuse not to think,
Karen and
ignoring the problem.
Rhonda, I'm not ignoring
Then
your
I'm
comments.
misunderstood.
I'm
But
reading
I
them, but
understand
I
that
just can't
governments
speak
will
about
and
those
all
things
governments
on
make fuck
YouTube.
decisions.
I think you can
Now, I
understand.
don't necessarily know if the federal government is particularly
I
more
will
likely
get
to make fucking decisions,
yeeted.
but the state governments would. I would err on the side that the
And
state
I
governments,
just
generally
can't, not
speaking,
on any
especially from what
platform,
I
I
see
can't
today,
talk about that.
all right, are more likely to make bad policy.
But I'm
However,
reading.
I see value in the fact that, like, at least for the few cases where the federal government, I know for a fact they did, you can't move. There is no opportunity to move. When a state does something bad and you disagree with it, you don't like their tax policy, you don't like their stance on abortion, the opportunity to move arises, which doesn't exist to the same extent with the federal government. And because of the fact that, like, unless you renounce your citizenship, the IRS will always fucking come for you. Now, luckily, most countries, they have double tax agreements. But obviously, like, these types of opportunities to move away from the United States, okay, does
But it's
not
not always the
exist
case as you
in
present.
the
So,
same
so,
way as
so,
the
so
states.
one is, first of all, you have to sort of cut. In which way does that cut, right? Because if you have the right policy, it affects everyone, of course. And then also, it's just a matter of law. It's not true. I mean, the United States can set a standard for whatever the criminal procedural right is for the country, and it can be a low standard. States are free to go above that. If it's like a minimum, they can have more protective rights. They can choose not to ban abortion, or they can imagine that the Constitution says you don't have a right to have an abortion. Your individual state can, imagine that's the wrong rule, and we think that's the wrong rule. Your state could have a protective right that gives you the right to abortion. So it's just not the case that states can choose to be more protective if they want to.
But that's not my point. Was that, like, it's very obvious that state governments are more likely to do the wrong thing. But even in spite of this,
before you were just guessing, now it's very obvious that they're more likely to do the wrong thing.
Well, okay. Do you think that, like, anything with regards to, like, voter suppression is going on at the, like, same level at the federal level? It does. The opportunity.
Who's in charge of voting in federal elections? Do you know?
The states.
The
Well,
state.
well, not just the states. Do you guys know what part of the Constitution dictates that? I mean, in Article 1, there's this really nice Article 1, I believe Section 2 or Section 4, where states can regulate, but Congress is free to come in and change rules, and they have rules on campaign finance.
Okay,
they have
like,
rules on the
that's
day
not
of the election.
argument.
Okay.
The argument isn't over whether or not the federal government or both. It's essentially like some sort of measure between the two, where, like, they have the right to regulate. Nobody's contending with that. The fact that the federal government isn't doing this in the first place is already, like, indicating my point.
But then there's a federal. You said the state governments are the ones who are usually doing the wrong thing. But
these laws, yes.
Okay, but now you're criticizing the federal government's lack of action.
Like, what is particularly, like, controversial here about state governments being more likely to fuck up?
Well, I think it's just like a conclusory statement that before you didn't seem too confident about, and now you do seem fairly confident about.
Typically, I prefer to just come from a point of weakness.
Okay. Well, I think you would be better served, like, discussing globally, who is institutionally competent to handle. And I think that the way that Tiberius was going was the right approach than just kind of having a prior that state governments in the main are more likely to fuck up. I think it's better to think about, institutional competency in domains of legislation.
And, like, they are wildly different. It would seem like obvious that, like, there's just more of an opportunity to pass laws at the state level, thus more opportunities to fuck up.
I'm questioning your methodology of evaluating the merits of federalism. I think the question is, in what hands should we put any individual power? And I think Tiberius's method of analyzing the issues is much more productive than just having these global statements like X entity is better or worse generally.
Can I put the brakes on your inquisition here for a second?
Sure.
Okay, appreciate it. Yeah, Big. I think I'm getting to the root of your, like, what you're arguing here, and that is, like, at the genesis is that because you have more states and you have more opportunities to fuck up, you're going to see more fuck ups. The problem is, like, this is a very basic logical fallacy to me, where it literally is a reaction in scale. If you have more opportunities, even with a similar error rate, you're going to see more errors as a net effect.
Proportionally, that, like, one particular government is or is, like, X is more likely to fuck up. Obviously we don't have the numbers on hand. I'm just saying significantly more laws are passed at the state level. All I know is, like, a hell of a lot more gets done there.
Same
Thus,
CT.
All right, if there is an opportunity,
I don't think I'm diagnosed, but yeah.
Now,
no, that's that. I completely understood that was your point, and my rebuttal was that if you just assume that the federal government and the state governments have the same level of general competency, and then you math that out because
They
the state.
don't. I would presume that the state governments oftentimes are way less competent.
Okay, then that's where that conversation has to go, and you have to explain that one.
Sure.
But you said the state governments pass more laws, but are also less competent than the federal government, which doesn't.
I thought that like
you can do that. Wait, what?
Yeah, the competency part obviously is like a necessity. I thought that was kind of implied. What I'm saying here is that, like there are a whole lot more. There's only one federal government, and there are a whole lot of states that are like are equivalent to West Virginia and Alabama, with regards to how they govern.
Could be just describing states that you disagree with. You're kind of begging the question.
It's not describing states that I disagree. It's describing
Yeah,
states
it's
that,
about morals and competence.
literally are like akin to, in many cases, all right, poor European countries. These states like have a history of like being the most oppressive towards like minorities.
That's being
They
generous for
have
European countries.
I agree with
vested interest in ensuring that like they oppress minorities so they can retain their power structures. Yeah, like I don't think that that's like me just naming states I disagree with.
No, but I'm questioning your method of analysis because you're, on the one hand, you're not discussing. Certain states do really, really well at legislating. They go way beyond whatever the federal standard is in terms of employment discrimination, or they'll provide minimum wages that are much higher. You're looking at the bad cases and you're like, wow, states do a really shitty job. And I agree. In general, I think the federal government should be a lot more active in different places. But it sounds like you're discounting the good work done in states that you agree with, and you're not factoring that in.
DeSantis.
Is that fair, or is that?
Wait, what are you talking about?
So like I think Massachusetts is like a very good example for the most part. Okay, there's absolutely like many cases where they fuck up, but like is an example of like a state with like relatively speaking less fuck ups than a lot of other states.
Sure.
Okay. Now my point is like it's great that everybody has the opportunity to move to Massachusetts. Now I understand individuals might not have the capital, or anything could go wrong that prevents an individual from moving to Massachusetts or whatever. Okay, and my point here is that that just doesn't exist, at least to the same extent, with the federal government. If like we had open borders with Canada, great, perfect like opportunity. Like if the federal government is pressing you, just move away. Okay, but we don't.
Mm-hmm. So I understand what the supremacy clause is, and I understand what I've explained to you now that there's certain policies that states actually can regulate above whatever the federal standard is. I don't know what your response is to that point.
I never contend with that. Like that wasn't ever my
position. So my I think we're left with a collection of states that do really shitty things, a collection of states that do like really good things, and so like between them, assess the problem. Like to what extent should states have powers, and if you're just pointing at bad states and like saying haha, you're doing a bad job, I think you're missing the states that are doing a good job, and you're missing a broader. Listen, I'm not making an argument one way or the other. I'm just assessing the method that you're making your argument, and I think you get a lot more work done talking about sort of the specific domains of regulation that you think should be in the hands of the states versus the federal government. For instance, like you might think whatever individual rights are, whatever criminal procedures, that is entirely in federal hands. Or maybe you think, anything related to tax policy, separate and apart from like income taxes, that's really the states. Or minimum, or what Tiberius said, minimum wage should be locally focused because that's where the cost of labor and capital, that's where it's most likely to be internalized. So those are the kind of, I think interesting in-depth conversations about institutional competency, and not this kind of broad spectrum. Look at the shitty things that Alabama are doing.
But like at the end of the day, that conversation will always, on any given issue, it's like, say, healthcare. Well, what's most efficient? What can be most practically achieved? And
so then you would be like, federal government should be in charge of healthcare.
You'd ask that question, and then you'd be like, oh, okay, well, like it would seem as if right now the best, like maybe a public option or like Medicare for all, whatever, like a study you pull out, okay, to indicate these types of factors. But like that's not the debate right now. Right now it's just a broad debate about like states' rights, and I'd always err on the side of just staying neutral, even if like the federal government had an equal level of fuck that of the state government. Even though I don't believe that, I would still err on the side of states' right just from a neutral standpoint, simply because of the fact that you have the opportunity to move away if that state government's doing something wrong.
Wordy, go ahead.
Okay. So there's a lot going on here, and I'm really fucking confused. Like, Cisco, Big Do, I feel like you guys are talking past each other to some extent, because I feel like as a general whole, you all agree, but you're not.
You sound really quiet, dude. I don't know what's going on with your mic. You're like super quiet. Yeah, you.
Oh, okay. I'll
No,
try
the
to be
other guy
louder.
that's talking.
Let me turn this up just a little bit. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm really fucking confused because what happens is I feel like you guys both generally agree that the states have like a lot of series of problems.
He has like a mounted mic too, but like it sounds like he's
just so,
talking on a cell phone.
I personally disagree with the idea of minimum wage should be on a state level because what happens is a lot of corporations are more efficiently organized across national lines, and that makes it much more hard for state level organization of like workers and such to be able to effectively like bargain for a minimum wage. So I feel like if we get organized on the national level, we can like more effectively compete against corporations in order to achieve a minimum wage. Because ultimately, the enemy in that instance is not the government, but the people who are manipulating the government in that instance.
Yeah, in any particular case, I agree that there should be a $15 minimum wage, a federal minimum wage, and I'm in favor of raising it. My critique with Big wasn't necessarily with the answer to any particular problem. It was his frame of looking at the issue, which seemed to be rather cursory and slapdash, if I may say so.
Okay, so in that instance, would you agree that because like just like on a statistical level, if you have more things being done, so like for example, if more laws are passed, then you're more likely to have a greater standard error of issues. Like for example, like whenever a company makes a product, the more they produce, they're bound to have more things that go wrong as a general trend.
Yeah. So the point, I think, Big's good point, which is the tendency for error in laws. The more laws you make, you're likely to see that borne out in states because that's where most of the laws are. And I think that is a salient point. But let's we shouldn't get over the fact that there are a lot of mistakes, gaps, and bullshit in federal laws too.
Yeah, and I very much agree with that.
Yeah. So as a general matter, if I were to give my affirmative position, I would say I think we need states. States provide a certain level of protection in certain domains. For instance, in the context of elections, part of the reason why Trump's procedural coup and Trump's efforts to stop the election were not successful in many ways was because our election laws are hyper federalized and because it's difficult to marshal a large amount of state actors to follow your plans to overturn the election. Similar in in susceptibility to foreign influence, and so those are unique strengths of the federal system, which I'm happy to talk about. I think that your arguments with respect to economic forces and regulation and the corporations being kind of national, I buy those arguments. And in the case of public goods, I think Big Do was saying in the case of healthcare, I would totally agree that there's so many problems in the market, whatever you want to call that lend themselves towards federal regulation and even federal control domination of healthcare. And so on the merits, any one of those fields of regulation, I'm happy to discuss. I just think we should discuss them and not just the tendency of any one of those actors to be good or bad in the main. That very much depends on your priors about whether they're right or wrong, and depends on which states you're looking at.
Well, the issue
you can just look at outcomes. We know for a fact that like outcomes for a child born in Massachusetts versus Alabama it's like hilariously different. And so I think it's obvious that like we can use states as cases for us to like evidence of like either side really. All right. What I'm saying is simply put, okay, is that like again, just look at where it's most efficient. Like obviously I think everybody agrees with this. Nobody's gonna be like, hey, do the thing that's least efficient because of like my weird deontological position that like states have like some God-given right to govern themselves. Okay. I don't think anybody's gonna come from the states' rights argument from that perspective unless they're a moron. All right. But what I think is useful is obviously looking at that case, what's most efficient, plus also recognizing like the federal government or no government is perfect in the way that it acts. All right. So at least if you can minimize the amount of harm that like to the most amount of people, somebody can move. Okay. That exists. That option exists. That's all I'm saying.
Prime, you're looking like you want to say something.
So this is an argument, something I brought up previously a few months ago. It's something I saw in the majority report with Sam Cedar. talked to a guy who was advocating for reorganizing how we look at the states, and that the states are an outmoded way of dividing up the nation, and that they were along political lines, right? But these political lines have been long obsolete, right? Like why New York, for instance, is divided the way it is, right? Like oftentimes these are geographical, right? And instead, there would be a much more useful way of organizing the country through regions, right? So what we could do, we could take blocks of states, right? The northeastern block, right? The southeastern block, the western block, right? These are regions where people have a lot in common, right? And have similar goals, right? And we could give them more autonomy, possibly, right? To actually get their priorities done. So what the compromise they brought up was like, well, the northeastern states, you can have your Medicare for all, right? Like you can actually do that within that block if we make the compromise that, okay, if you get to have that, then the South gets to ban abortion. Like, is that like a worthwhile compromise? Because right now we're just not getting anything done, right? We can see like
I would take neither.
let me just finish my point. We can see the
I would take
the
that.
amazing, incredible gridlock that we have within our Congress, in which we have these states who are fighting each other endlessly and grinding all progress to a halt. So if we reorganize ourselves and say, like, all right, well, with the power of the backing of the federal government to these states to accomplish their goals, right? Saying that we'll form this unions, and we'll still have one single army. That's very important. One single army. But that part's important. But beyond that, you could still accomplish all kinds of great legislative goals and not be held back by regional cultural differences, right? And so let the southern states fucking burn, basically, is what I'm saying.
Hey, I live here. I don't have a
Okay.
choice, okay.
Hey, just move. That's what Big Dude said.
I don't have a choice to move right now.
I'm just messing with you. But go ahead.
I want this one
before you burn mine.
Go ahead, Ty, and then we'll go to Wand.
Yeah, I've actually, or the first part, as far as like reorganizing the states, I'm actually in favor of this. I've been saying something on the lines of that. Although I think they need, no, seriously, I think they need redrawn because the earlier states, the colonial states, like Rhode Island, Massachusetts, that kind of thing, they're all incredibly small for the size that they have. They don't represent their geography. It's basically across the nation. It's all political.
Geography?
Yeah.
What the fuck do you care about geography?
Who cares?
Split up California.
Because as the geopolitical guy here is that geography affects how a society develops. And if you actually draw the borders along those geographic lines, you'll actually find that people are far more represented because of the way that they operate.
Geography has nothing to
Geography
do with
is super
how big
important.
has nothing to do with how big your state is. What's relevant with regards to government in this case would be like how many people you represent within those borders. Now, geography, like certain futures, like, hey, this place is very rural, okay, or it has a lot of like fertile land, right? Thus, like, there's a lot of farming going on versus like, I don't know, like some random state like Wyoming, all right, which has its own particular unique geographical geographical circumstances, okay, that might differ from the Northeast. The relevant factor would be like, hey, how many people are in your country or in your borders?
So let's go to. So before we do that, I just want to get to Womp. Womp's been waiting very patient. I want to get that in.
God.
Don't worry, we're not gonna escape this point because I want to get back to it. But Womp. If you're talking, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, buddy. You're muted somewhere, not in Discord. Somewhere else you're muted. Want to give it another try?
He's not even talking. That's crazy.
He was trying. I think he's trying to unmute himself. Womped? Nope, you're still muted, buddy. Sorry, buddy. I don't know what happened. Yeah,
the anarchist internet finally gave out.
Anarchist internet. Okay. Well,
taking over.
Okay. We'll come back to you, Womps. Okay, we'll come back to you.
This policy that you're proposing, Prime, is never going to happen, and it's stupid to consider. That's what I mean.
Okay,
Well,
hold on.
Is
Okay,
it
I'm here for
far-fetched?
it.
Is it far-fetched? Sure. Like, I mean, that completely upends the entire Senate and all that other shit. The other side of this is that, like, I'm actually going to agree with this major characteristic is that the states are fuckered. Texas and California should not have 2 senator seats. They should have a lot more. They're too fucking big. They should absolutely be split up.
No
They should
argument
actually
would
be
be
Facts.
fair. Yeah, I mean,
Right. Yeah, like
Split up
the new-
California.
Like if you actually drawed states on like any kind of geographic lines, Texas would be 3 states, New England 5 would actually be 1 state. You would actually find that the Senate and the House would both represent their people better if you actually drew it with some common sense. But the original sense that the thing that I was trying to say,
this is what I'm advocating for.
yeah, I'll get there later.
More or less.
The earlier states are founded off the settler period, or I'm sorry, the colonial period, so they're all fuckered in that regard. And then the race west is all about slavery. So all those states are drawn in just the most fuckered ways possible.
Yeah, and Pisco, I take 1 second. Pisco got a yeah, I can take a shot at you. First of all, the way that we've organized states has changed drastically in this country, right? I mean, we used to have a confederate view of things, correct? Right?
Correct.
The states used to have a lot more autonomy. And then after the Civil War, right, we redrew the compact, right, between the states, and I know we're under this one federal government, but even then, we've had certain relations and certain allegiances between political blocks. This would be formalizing them, right? Formalizing. This, I mean, the southern states have always kind of acted together, especially since the Civil War. They've acted together for a
Filthy
lot.
fucking rebels.
Yeah,
dirty traitors.
Dirty fucking traitors. But so this would be formalizing them and then making sure they don't get in each other's way, right? So again, I don't think it's so far-fetched. Like to get those goals, to get those great progressive values that like a lot of us share here, right? Many of us, there are a lot of goals that we're trying to accomplish within a nation that we just simply cannot with the current political formula we have here.
Well,
right?
why do you think
Why
we
not?
can't? Like,
Well, so I mean, because I'm looking at what we've actually accomplished. We've actually accomplished fucking nothing. We can only, at the very best, we've done like half-ass compromises, right? So I'm saying like if we limit these things, right? There's so many things that are completely politically impossible. There are other things. So Pisco says this is politically impossible, but other things are politically impossible now because of the current political formula. So if you could change things along, like I think something like Medicare for all, right, would be a lot more possible if it was just if we were just worried about like what the northeastern states wanted, right? Like I think you would agree with that would be much closer to making that a possibility. Great. So that's just one or environmental regulations, right? That we desperately want to get passed, right? That would be much more easier, or like regulating drugs, right? All these things. It would be much more easier if we could just look at this one block, right? And then the other blocks, right, who have a different view of things, do what they want. So I don't know why this is so crazy. It's such a crazy idea. Just simply reorganizing, and if you want, you could call it like what Chai said, simply redrawing states, right? Like if that's what you want to do. But
we just have 3 big states.
Why? Why? But why? I don't see why we are. The point is, and I'll let you go in, Big Joe, because I want to hear what you have to say. The point is, why are we so tied to these old lines that were drawn on a map, right? They were drawn literally hundreds of years ago, right? For a different time, for different reasons. We can understand things have changed, right? The political lines have changed. The battlefield has changed. So why don't we redraw the battle lines? Go ahead.
So I see a lot of value in what you're talking about. Like I like from an ideal standpoint, I'd be like, yeah, great, do this. But the issue is, of course, like A, probably won't ever happen, and B, like it requires a lot of effort. When in reality, with regards to what most progressive people want, with regards to this is like Medicare for all or like some sort of public option, increasing the minimum wage. The issue is that like America is just like wildly undemocratic at least at the federal level, and because of the fact that like each state, okay, gets like 2 Senate seats. All right, if we were to instead like focus our efforts on like, I don't know, admitting Washington D.C., restoring the Voting Rights Act, okay, ensuring that like mail-in ballot or the like the opportunity to mail in your ballot.
What's keeping that from happening? What's keep the things you just said, right? All those things. What's keeping those things from happening?
what's keeping all those things from happening right now, at least in the case of like Washington
Congress,
DC,
legislation.
It's called no. I'll even give it a weather.
give you
It's
the
the Republican
it would
Party.
Be Christian Cinema and Joe Manchin.
No. That's
no.
That's not the only reason. I mean, fuck those two. I mean, like, go to hell. But they don't have the only fucking reason.
But like those two people are literally what's holding up most of the legislation.
No, it's not. Hold on. The fact that they have a filibuster, right? That's part of it, right? And that filibuster is being held up by an intransigent Republican Party that Ty was so kind to name, right? And that Republican Party largely falls, not entirely, but largely falls the line of the southern states, right? Like, we could redraw things once again, right? For them to be clear, for people to have better representation. Along those lines. So the thing, you named a few things there, and I'm forgetting what you said. Give me one of the things you said. I'm sorry.
Restoring the Voting Rights Act, making Washington D.C. a state.
Yes, Washington D.C. a state. Yes, exactly. Why hasn't that already happened? Right? It's because the southern states, oftentimes the southern states, and some of the other states, don't want that to happen. Why? Because there's not fucking enough white people there. Right? There's too many fucking dark-skinned people there, and it's going to go Democratic.
Like reorganizing the entire state, the entire structure of the federal government. Like, again, I agree with this from like an idealistic standpoint, but like I'm saying that like it doesn't at any point seem like particularly likely that it's going to occur.
So okay,
so the only reason people advocate for Washington D.C. becoming a state is because they want 2 more Democratic seats in the government.
Shut the fuck up. That's the dumbest thing.
No, Pisco, that's bullshit. That's easily the
dumbest thing
number
I ever heard. That's
No,
the only reason why. How about having some congressional
Okay.
representation for 600,000 plus American citizens in this country?
Just make it part of Maryland then.
Shut up.
Why don't we just grant that Washington D.C. it should only be admitted because it's going to bring in 2 Democratic seats? Okay, great. The issue is like there are so many more red states, hard red states, and the Senate's already disproportionately in favor of these smaller states that are oftentimes red. That like admitting Washington D.C. is just making it more fair. It's literally making the Senate more representative of the American population, which is more Democratic than Republican.
What if we redrew the states again? Trying this again. Either my idea, which is not quite redrawing the states, or Ty's idea, which is redrawing the states. What if we redrew those states along population lines, right? So that and there's 2 things before I get to that. There's 2 things. Before that, we have conversations here all the time about like things that are impractical, but we're just wondering, like, would this be a good idea? This is one of those conversations. Would this be a good idea, right? Now, is this going to happen tomorrow? Absolutely not, right? This is a brand new concept for many people. There's no way. Yes, you're saying, yeah, this is unlikely to happen. Sure, absolutely. I'm talking about, would this be a good idea? Would this
assume you could do it with no cost, is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So I still think it's a bad idea.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, but
there's a really easy
on the other side. On the other side of it, like, what if we redrew the states? So in terms of population, you're exactly right with what you said. In terms of the Senate being skewed to states with very small populations, right? And that causing all kinds of democratic issues. Okay, so what if we redrew the states? So they're better reflective. So you can still have each state can still have 2 senators, maybe, right? And do what Ty was talking about, breaking up California and making that 3, right? Would that be a good idea? Why are we so tied to these old lines on the map? Why are we loyal to these lines that mean nothing? That we could decide, not likely, but we could decide to simply change them.
I agree that these lines are arbitrary with respect to federal representation, and I think that to the extent that you can make the Senate, there's some notion of having a body that is 2 chambers, bicameral legislature. I think that's a good idea, but I agree. Have it tied to population sizes, and just keep states as a concept for internal state politics, and then you can have the best of both worlds. You have a representative federal legislature and the commensurately representative presidential elections, since the electoral votes are based on the state's Senate, the amount of senators they have plus the number of representatives. I think that you should make it more representative. But I don't favor Prime of having 3 separate countries or 2 separate countries. It sounds like that's what your solution inexorably leads to as these different regions become more and more desynchronized, and essentially,
Hey,
Prime.
Yeah, yeah. You're
Thank
leaving.
you so much for having me on. I gotta go. Have
Yeah.
a great night, everybody. Sub to
Great.
Prime,
See you.
sub to Prime, sub to Prime.
Thanks so
Good
much.
to see you, Servitor.
Good to see you guys
But
too.
I would argue with you, buddy. And I see you, Womp. Don't worry, I see you. But I would argue that we already are becoming culturally distinct, right? But we already see that people are moving geographically to areas where other people happen to agree with them, right? We're already shaping out to be that way. We already have, and you know this better than I do, Mr. Soon-to-be lawyer man, right? That within different states, right, in different regions, you'll see that people have different rights. Right. Once we leave it up anything we leave up the states, we're having vastly different rights. And we know this especially is most acute when it comes to women's bodily autonomy. This is already happening. It's happening right now. So
yeah,
why
but
not?
there's no danger of the breakage of the union. We fought a war to
I didn't
maintain.
say that. Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that we were in a breakage.
That's what I'm
saying
concerned about when we have.
Go ahead, please.
That's what I'm concerned about when there's talk of regional line drawing and making smaller amount of states. It sounds like we're moving the United States away from this large union really of disparate principalities into 3 or 4 countries. And I think it's not a good idea because there's utility in having a large country. What would we do with currency, right? So many of our institutions.
I'm not asking for that, but that's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for one nation. It's very important. Hold on. One nation, one currency, one military. That part's extremely important. I'll repeat it for a 4th time. One military, or else we will have those problems. Absolutely. And we still have a federal government. And if you're talking about exactly how this will end up shaking out, I'm not exactly sure. But just wondering that I'm just saying that how we're currently doing things is clearly not working. This endless gridlock that we're having is due because we're voting. We're already voting in this manner, but we don't have the structures to accommodate this, right? We're already voting in regional blocks. Why not accommodate that within the government instead of fighting against it? Is my point. Let's go to WAMT, and don't worry, we'll get to all of you back again. But let's go to WAMT. Let's go to PB. Let's go to Rage, and then where did you have your hand up? Ready? Oh.
Yeah.
So it occurs to me that the most common sense way to separate, if you're going to redraw anything, is by watershed.
I have
where you take each watershed that people are in and group people together like that. That way, if they have any water problems, they're at least in the same district as the other people they'd be having water problems with.
What?
Just the one.
Why?
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that's so arbitrary.
Water?
Why not like anything else?
Because we need water to live.
Yeah,
Unironically, he's actually not too terribly
I'm,
far from the mark, but that's a whole.
I just want to
caliber
ask Prime why he thinks that.
I mean, you want to base sovereignty on the modern United States on watershed?
I forgot about that.
Watershed, yeah.
If you go down this route, I'm telling you, Pisco, it's a whole.
I really just want to ask him about.
You don't even want a government, so I don't know.
I don't know if he wants to go there.
I suspect.
And this.
It's
really short and sweet. But
non-government having
I don't know
theories.
None
So
of this seems
why?
like it really matters.
Why even have anything?
It's a deep dark hole. You're
we
about to go down. Don't do it.
Okay,
honestly, like, I want some arbitrator.
Actually, I feel like I saw that in the title.
If you are
other night,
fucking around upstream from me and ruining my water supply.
Yeah, I just think it's like
because otherwise I
it's
might
stupid to grant that much power to the government. I mean, like, of course you want it when your party's got all the power. But
don't worry, I actually want you to answer that question later on. I want to get these other people in first.
It was the reverse.
Because I need to do that. But my question in terms of why can't we accommodate what's already happening in terms of our states voting in regional blocks?
If Trump was in office,
why can't we accommodate
if Trump was in office right now and they were holding the Senate and Congress, the Republicans were, the Democrats would be freaking out if they were trying to get rid of the filibuster.
Yeah, I think
like
it's
literally
actually,
it would be like raging
thought
in the streets.
experiment.
So
but
I don't know.
Like in like trying to think about it in like practical context,
put the shoe on the other
as opposed
foot.
to like all history kind of thing, which I really love.
Put the shoe on the
stuff,
other
like,
foot,
and
stuff,
so,
people would be
like
losing
I think it's
their
interesting
minds.
to think about, but because I think it's very like
politically
intractable, like redrawing the state lines isn't something that is so politically distant from us. Like it would have to be like hundreds of years from now, and then
Is it a good idea? Is it a good idea? Ignore that. Is it a good idea? Ignore that.
Is it a good idea? Yeah. I think that I would ask for more. So, you're saying things like free association, go even further, just erase all the lines. And I know
Yeah,
that,
but
like,
that's
yeah,
the
so, like,
point though. All it takes is
erase
one
all the
crazy
borders, erase
person
all
on
the
either
lines,
side,
let
man.
people,
They just take advantage
organize,
of all
or maybe keep the lines, but make them not,
all the political power.
the
And then just throw their weight around without any kind of
He said he was.
any kind of
Yeah,
pushback.
I missed that part.
Crenshaw.
missed
yeah,
that.
right.
Okay.
Roll the rule without borders memes, please.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I didn't realize you were coming from that perspective.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. So that's like a political vision that anarchists have, to imagine a society where you're minimizing hierarchy as much as possible. You give self-governance to individual
No,
people.
we know. So along
Yeah,
what we're talking about now.
Sorry, I'm not going to go into full anarcho-phil mode or anything like that. I'm just saying that, like, whatever the organization of state and federal governments now facilitates that, like, for example, like, funding from the federal government that goes to the states and then that gets allocated to, like, to public education, infrastructure, to individual communities who can then have some level of autonomy at the local level. Whatever facilitates bottom up as much as possible, while we still have this kind of top down system,
I know, Sam.
is
It's
what
all
I would
good.
advocate for.
Don't want.
Let's go Rage, then Wordy. And then I want to try
Yeah, but
again
I mean,
for Pisco.
if you're getting
See if
paid,
he'll
man,
can
I
answer
mean,
that question.
you're still doing.
And then also a big deal because I'm
doing
curious what he
work.
has to
Oh,
say there,
Sam,
too. Go ahead, Rage.
Do you have an email
right.
for Destiny? And if so,
kind of have a couple
could you
questions.
could I maybe
going
could you
back
maybe
to the
DM me
concept
and I could
of
email
the
you about
laboratories
something?
of
I was trying to
democracy,
organize something with him, but because I
we
think
have
it's
a lot
a
of
really good idea.
policies,
But
like the Medicare for all or like
I messaged
$50
him on
minimum
Discord,
wage,
but it's kind of hard to
that
explain.
would
Yeah.
otherwise be pushed if
And
there
I don't
wasn't,
want to
like,
sit there and
resistance from
blow
the
his
Republican
DMs
Party.
up. Like, he's responded to me before, but I just
why is it that a lot of states
Okay, yeah.
don't do these internally? Like, why doesn't
I'll do
California,
that,
which presumably would vote for Medicare for all, why doesn't
I mean,
California
honestly,
have, which
if
is
you
one of,
want,
it's like the most prosperous state in the union. Why
it
don't
would
they
be
have
easier to explain in
why don't
voice.
they do this?
I
Because
don't know
if the
how
argument is grouping a bunch
much
of
you guys
states
are in
together but
contact,
not
but if
having
he
a
has
whole
like
union would allow these
2
things to get
minutes, I
passed,
could just explain it a lot better than typing it out.
I'm
I could just end
questioning
my
if that would
stream.
actually
I mean,
work.
I could end my stream
Sorry,
and I could
because
just jump.
How so?
in
You're
if
saying, say that
if
again.
you want to
I'm
ask
sorry.
him if it's
You're
okay to
questioning
run
what
it by
exactly
him.
about it?
Because, like,
I
if
could
you're
just
saying if we were to break
explain
up or group states together and then they could pass whatever they pass whatever
I
they
mean, you
want.
could
We
kick
already
me out
have states
after. You could just
individual
explain
that
to
don't
him.
pass some of the things that they advocate for federally.
I mean, yeah. If you want
Right.
to
So
maybe ask for
like
permission to
like
drag me in
Medicare
for like
for
2
all,
minutes
California
and just
doesn't
explain my
like
idea,
presumably
and
they
then you
don't
can
have
kick me
Medicare
out
for all
after.
working in as
Either
on their
way,
state level.
I know what you're saying
like,
now.
because that would be the
No,
fastest
you're making a good point, and this
way
is why
to
you would do this, right?
run
This is
it by him,
exactly
but
why you do this, because many of these states, right? There are things that they would like to do, but they work on too small of a scale, right? Like an
yeah,
individual
I really
state's
only need like
economy is not able to
5
do some
minutes
of
at
these
the
things.
most
These
just to run it past
long-term
him. I think
products.
he
So I
would.
brought
I
up
think it
Medicare
would.
for
I think it would be a
because
good
of that,
idea
right?
because it
Because
would
there are
be
some
like a
states
semi
who like to do
debate.
that, but on their level, they just can't accomplish.
But yeah,
That's why I'm saying if they were doing this, one, with the economies of multiple states grouped together, they might be able to accomplish these long-term
yeah, I know he
projects.
is. That's why I
And two,
like.
they would have the
I
backing
don't
of
know.
the
I
federal
like.
government, right?
I've
So
been
even
kind
if
of
these things are
binge watching
projects
a
are
lot of his
working
content. I really like.
in a local, in
It's
a
weird
regional,
because I feel like
localized level,
we
right? They
are
would still have
almost
federal backing
exactly
into these things,
on the
rather than
same
just a state
positions on a
project with
lot of
state level
things.
backing.
It's
Does that
just
make
that
sense?
I ended up on the right and he
with
ended
the
up on the
state.
left.
I
which
was
is kind of
missing
like
the
confusing to
federal
me.
backing part.
Yeah.
The
I
issue
mean,
I
there's some
think with this
things that we
is
differ
that,
on,
like,
but yeah.
while I think it's obviously more ideal than the system we have.
Yeah, I did.
That,
I wasn't. I missed it on the politics server,
say one state
unfortunately.
decides
I don't
it
know what I
wants
was
to
doing,
fund
working or something.
right? And this is like obviously the
And then
collective
apparently he got banned.
all right, they decide that
I don't know
like,
what
they
that was
want to
about.
fund healthcare in I don't know whether it be the
Nice,
Pacific
go figure.
Northwest or
I mean, I
whether
don't feel
it's
like that's hard to do though.
making all of the West Coast.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's what I
It
heard.
doesn't matter. It's just borders. All right. And they decide to do that. And then the other state disagrees.
I saw Destiny's debate with like Nick Fuentes and
the other
Lawrence
states
Southern
in
and
that
like a bunch
regional
of other
block? Is that what
people,
you're saying?
and he just like
yeah, but like obviously the federal
Crushed them
government would
all. It
have
was
to
like a
have some sort of
1v6. It was kind of ridiculous.
structure, all right, for collecting tax
The dude's
revenue.
smart, man.
So unless if we said, A, this is hands off the
Yeah,
federal
that was a
government
while
fund
ago.
in the first
I
place,
told you,
could
I've
see a
been
lot of
binge watching a lot of
issues
his
with
content. That's why I was like,
But then too, on top of it, you
Destiny's
have, like, this
bringing me,
more akin to,
literally
like,
brought me like dead
the
center. I
issue
feel like
we
right
had
now.
was that since there's no real
I wouldn't go.
fiscal
I don't think I'll go
policy,
so far to say
alright,
like I'm libertarian
put
left
on
now, but I'm definitely
alright,
a lot like dead
yet there
in the
is a
center.
linked monetary
He's managed to
you
change
can
my
have
mind on a few
eradications of
key
rights
issues.
Now, like, the same thing can occur in the United States, but just not to the same extent, because the federal government's far
But
more
I'm
overarching than, like,
still set my
than
ways on a few
compared to
things
the
that I think
EU.
keep me on the right
So if we're going to have the
or
federal
right
government have
leaning. But
less of a role on government, the opportunity for these types of things arise, and disputes
nice.
over, like, whether or not we ought to pay for these types of things definitely will be more serious, in my
But
opinion.
yeah, I would just
Since
like
like
to
right
have
now,
his ear for like
we're kind of
5
okay with,
minutes
like,
to run an idea by him because I think he
being
would.
tax
I
negative
think it
and
would
not have
be a net
Massachusetts
positive
being tax
for
positive. That seems cool, but
everybody.
what if we're all just a
But I would
block
probably
of
want to.
countries, or essentially like
It could be on TRN,
equivalent to like
but
EU
it could also just
countries,
be on his channel
alright,
too,
with
or.
millions of people, and we're all just trying to fight for our own self-interest.
But yeah,
And we're all just trying to get what we can out of this institution.
But that's not what I'm advocating for. I'm not advocating for EU style. I'm not aiming at.
Yeah, it would be both, but I think I would want to. That's what I'm saying. Like,
think
it's.
you would.
I would
I
need
don't-
to
I don't
like
think,
explain it to him and then see how
your
he wanted
comparison is
to do it.
fair.
I guess.
And the what you're talking about in terms of monetary policy, we could have a unified monetary policy.
Yes and no.
Like, so
sort
just
of.
like there's what we're currently doing, what we've been
Okay,
arguing.
so
states' rights.
I'll try to.
Fiscal policy.
Oh God,
Yeah, we
no!
can
I
have a
wouldn't
single
even
fiscal
want to
policy
be.
if you
Yeah,
want
I
to,
wouldn't be.
right?
I wouldn't want to
We
be
can-
in like an open chat like that. I would
So
really.
just like
I would.
right now, we're
It's
talking
sort of
about,
more personal to me
what's,
and my
should
positions and
and
stuff,
should
so
be
it would
within
be
the purview
something
of the
that I would
states,
want.
right? You
Probably
can
just
talk
do
about like
one-on-one
what
with
should
him.
and should be in the purview
Yeah.
of the regions, right? And something that shouldn't be in their purview is having their own
Because it'd be
military.
mostly
I'm going to
like
keep saying that because
conversation.
that part's very important.
Yeah, no,
All right, so at least one part
so
of it
that's
is
one.
that I
That's
basically
just
want to
one
have an
example. But there are
interview
other
with him,
examples, right? So you can talk about this fiscal
where I just
policy,
kind
right?
of humanize him,
We
like
could
just your
say
basic
that
like Joe
because
Rogan
of the
type,
reasons
get
you
to
listed
know
or
him
other
better,
reasons,
like
we might
because there's a lot of
decide that outside
you don't
the
ever see
purview
anything except
of,
for him like
the regional
debating
blocks.
people and like
And,
crushing
we could have the federal government
lefties and
still,
righties. So that would be
handle
like
that,
one thing
right?
that I
There are
definitely
lots
want
of
to do
things. There are lots
with
of
him,
issues that this would raise,
because I think it would
100%,
be a
but I
net
think these are
positive.
all
And
things we could
then
tackle.
the second would be more of a debate because there's just some general questions that I want to ask more about as like policies and maybe challenge a little bit.
So
But
that's
then
the
there's a
point.
few key things
Sure,
that I'm
we
interested
able and
in
capable
having like a debate
of
with him.
raising
But
taxes to do this. If we did it at
so yeah,
California,
I'm putting together like a
at the
list of.
California level. Let's just say California doesn't want to do it because it makes them a lot less competitive. All right, and this same issue would exist with these governments, but like it would be.
So it wouldn't be like a
lot
debate
worse
like he
because they would
normally
be
has where people are
expected to do it.
screeching at
But
each other,
plus on
but
top of it,
I think it would be a net positive
now you have states that like or like
for
entire
everybody.
blocks of
I think it would help
countries,
bring
essentially of millions of
a
people
lot of
now
good
just
ideas that
looking
he
to, like,
has
see the federal government as a money pot.
to the right in a way and
that's
bring.
really what they would serve.
Yeah,
I see
I don't
like
know.
there being a
I just
value
think it would be
in
really
the current
cool.
structure of federal government that kind of ties everybody together.
Again,
If you understand what I'm saying.
I think I understand what you're saying. The federal government would tie everyone together. We would not be giving up the federal government, and like
I get that.
no, I don't think you do, because the fact that you even said that. Like, no, we still, and this one I'm proposing, there would still be a federal government that would still, so we'd still be one nation, right? But we'd simply be formalizing what we've already seen now, people voting, states voting in regional blocks, and I know there are a few things there. It's going to take me time, but I'll come back to you. Maybe we can dig that out more. I want to get to Pisco because I know he's not feeling too great. So I want to make sure I get his answer before he dips out. Yeah.
So the question is, assume no transaction costs, assume no cost of implementation. So I just want to flag for the audience here that is a tremendous thing to assume, right? And I just want to, in many ways, like think about so much of our laws are structured around statehood. Statehood is built into the Constitution. You're talking about an up and down, like reglow or glow up of the Constitution in a way that is totally unprecedented, and even compared to the civil rights, the Civil War amendments, like this is on quadrillion level scales above that. Okay, maybe not quadrillion, maybe like couple dozen levels above that. All right. So
is there any mechanism for states to join together? Because like we have, I think, a mechanism for like splitting states
there
apart.
actually is in the Constitution. There's you do need like approval of the constituent states, and I don't believe it's ever been done before. Yeah, but there are rules. Like think about the amendments. All the like for the most part, amendments need to be done either with the initiative of the states or have the approval of the states. And so these state actors are never going to give up their power, and they won't consent to it because they don't want to be a small fish in a big pond, or they'll lose their legislature. They won't have the ability to control their, whatever they're controlling. So it's, we're assuming a lot when we're assuming there's no costs here.
I can that last point, but go ahead, please.
even if I assumed, that I agreed with you in the abstract, the real costs and practical concerns would be enough for me to get rid of it. But now let me address the sort of Nirvana-esque ideal of what if we could reorder without cost.
Stop ruining our fun, damn it.
Yeah, right. I
100% support Pisco on this. Like, it's I do not expect it to ever happen, but it's one of those deals where if I could ever like push the narrative, it's like, yeah, maybe we should redraw the states. These are completely antiquated. They're out of date.
Okay, well, I think that people's lives and how they order themselves should be given primacy, but we're putting aside the practical concerns. We're living in where everyone agrees with us all the time, and if everyone agrees with us all the time, I'd be an anarchist too. Like, why even have a government? But sort of taking you at face value, Prime, I think one of the geniuses of the constitutional design was it recognized that one of the biggest threats to our union was precisely having
other states,
different regions that are like too powerful and grow too powerful and too separated from each other, and that they would become regional forces and like eventually either start a war or split up. And that was
which happened, which exactly was happened.
Yeah.
Really, that didn't work. So,
okay.
No, what Pisco is arguing here is that you're actually, if you go with what you're wanting, is that you may very well supercharge that to where it happens again.
No, but
I don't want Texas
throwing happen.
Well, no, I'm not going to say. Look, you're absolutely right that it happened in the past. What Pisco's advocating is that if you did the more regional union thing, which actually I think we might end up going down anyway, is that you could hyper accelerate where we do this all over again. And this time, the stakes are a little higher because Texas is just going to nuke California.
Remember, important to Prime's argument is unitary military control, and my fear is by I don't know what federal policy would look like. Maybe you would consider these regions only as autonomous as states are now, and they're just bigger states. And that kind of removes, in my mind, a lot of the genius of having multiple states, which is this kind of experimentation thing. That seems kind of out the window. If
they still have that.
Wait, Prime, were you talking about less states?
No, I wasn't talking about less states, but people keep getting confused with that. So to make it clear, Pisco, right? I'm not talking about having less states. Each individual states within the block.
Oh,
yeah. So there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I address it? So
Sure.
Oh, so are you saying there's another layer?
Yeah.
Another layer. Adding another layer, basically. Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Maybe I'm explaining it poorly. That might be my fault.
Okay. That makes way more sense. Yeah.
Power is a zero-sum game, and so the power is coming from. Okay, time.
No,
the power is coming from. There's a whole pizza, right? That whole pizza represents all governmental power, and that pizza you can divide it however you want, but you're never gonna get more pizza, right? You're given one big pizza, and you giving power to some other regional autonomous zone.
No. Are we talking about just in the straight up political form that there's only 100 senators, there's never any more, there's never any less?
No, I mean one level of generality above that. So
okay,
in general, right?
Representatives.
No. Look, Pisco, do this, please.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is the amount of power and control that you have in any given area, geographical or otherwise, is limited. It's finite, and you, whenever you're giving power to some other body, you're taking power away from someone else. It's either you're taking away power from the people or from the state organizations or from the federal government.
Magic
and so
missiles,
my question is, from whom are you taking this power? Are you taking it?
I was about to
the
end
power to
the
regulate interstate
stream
commerce
and
away
try
from
to,
Congress, so that each state region
try
can
to
have that
message,
power? I mean, who is
I'm like
losing in this equation? Who's losing the power?
Okay, yeah, this is where I might get lost in the weeds with you on this. Is that
I'm not
while
really even
you're absolutely right that
participating in the
there's
panel
level
anymore.
jurisdiction
figure
that
something
contradict
out.
one another, and that you have to divvy that up and da 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 da. The existential or the core thesis that you put out there was that power is a zero sum is definitely not the case. We can talk about how Texas is growing to a level that they're getting 3 more representatives. We're going to see or we're going to see multiple states lose that just as part of our given system. Is that the inevitable calculus that you look at here is that each political institution is not constrained to a specific scale. It can grow, it can shrink, it can change, it can completely rework exactly how it works. So
Okay,
that's where I want to fight
total
you.
power in the entire country is finite, is what I'm saying, right?
Finite, yes, but it does not mean that the factors of
Yeah, you can adjust power levels, relatively speaking. But
Yes.
any
Okay.
representation that Texas gets is representation that other people lose. That's what I mean when I say zero sum. And the ultimate power, just the ability to do whatever you want all the time and regulate everyone's lives, and people have no rights, and and then just one person has rights.
That's fine. I'll concede that final point.
Okay, so who are you taking power away from?
I would say that we not. It depends. It depends. Maybe I am taking power away from.
You are, wait, but you are, because if a state, imagine you have a region, right? And
Yeah.
Massachusetts, New York, and like Connecticut and Massachusetts, they disagree on like a lot of shit. If you look at the laws, they're like totally different. So you're essentially giving this region either the power to supplement whatever state laws is. Now the states don't have that authority anymore, or you're taking power from the federal government to regulate, whatever domain has supremacy clause authority over that region, and you're taking it away from whatever unitary government that is. So that power is coming from somewhere, and it's coming from some actor.
No. So, okay. Once again, I think Medicare for All is the perfect example for this, right? It is a big project, right? That a state like, let's say, Rhode Island, if Rhode Island wanted to do it, and I'm not sure if Rhode Island does, but let's say Rhode Island wanted to do that, Rhode Island would be completely outmatched. Like it just won't be able to do it on the scale of its economy. Okay, right? So Rhode Island and a couple of like-minded states in a block, right? Then on that level, on this matter, they agree. Let's work collectively. So it's collective organization on another scale, right? So we have decided, like the states of Pennsylvania, New York, Rhode Island, New Jersey, right, Delaware, that we are within this block, and we want to accomplish this big project, right? Whether it's like some infrastructure project that's just too big, too expensive for a single state on its economy. Let's all get together. Let's make this happen, right? So we're not taking power away from, at least my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong about this. We're not taking power away from the federal government, right? We're saying that we're giving states more power, right, to accomplish things that they could not do on their own. Does that make sense? I hope it does.
The reply from Pisco largely is going to fall along this, if I may, Pisco, is that you're absolutely right in that you can empower a regional union to do something more because the federal government can, and you can get these regional blocks to do more because they will have the collective power to do so. This is the benefit of economies of scale. The other side of this, where this all tends to go to hell, is that
So I think I'm gonna end this stream, guys, just because I've kind of been like AFK for a while, anyways, like typing and stuff. And then I'm just gonna say peace out to Prime, and then hop out of this panel. It's 3 in the morning for me anyway, so. But yeah, thanks to everybody who came through. I think there was like a couple subs, so thanks for those as well. And yeah, you guys have a good night.
To the majority of whatever that regional union is.